Badlands. Explain those Badlands. That's a hell of a name.
We were sleeping. I've been sleeping. I've been turning away from a truth I wanted not to face. There is a wound that won't heal at the center of the galaxy. There is a darkness reaching like rust into everything around us. We let it grow, and now it's here.
How many men have you killed, Merlin?
I don't know.
50? 100? Countless.
Countless has a nice ring to it.
And how many lives have you saved?
500,000. Population of King's Landing. Tell me if your precious Randy commanded you to kill your own father and stand by while thousands of men, women, and children burned alive, would you have done it? Would you have kept your oath then?
Our time has come. We prepared. We grew stronger. While you rested in your cradle of power, you were trusted to lead the Republic. But you were deceived. You assumed no force could challenge you. And now, finally, we have returned.
The visions are clear now. I see possible futures all at once. Our enemies are all around us. And in so many futures they prevail. But I do see a way. There is a narrow way through.
It's not a prophecy. It's a story that you keep telling, but it's not their story, it's yours. They deserve to be led by one of their own. What your people did to this world is heartbreaking.
We gave them something to hope for.
That's not hope!
We have survived by hiding from them, by running from them. But they are the gatekeepers. They are guarding all the doors, they are holding all the keys, which means that sooner or later, someone is going to have to fight them.
I wish none of this had happened.
So do all who live to see such times, but that is not for them to decide. All we will have to decide is what to do with the time that is given us.
Forgive me. I did not see. I have failed you all.
You will bring me. Catch on. I do not know what strength is like that. I swear to you, I will not let the White City fall. Our people fail. Our people. Our people.
I wish you good fortune in the wars to come. And now it begins. No. Now it ends.
All right, people, welcome. Oh, there we go. To The Narrative, episode 35. These are getting tougher to name at times because maybe I'm getting too ambitious with the topics. Named this one the Trump Tightrope. I think that that fits with a lot of the things we're going to discuss tonight. We are, what are we? Oh my God. 8 full months into the golden age, which feels like it just started a couple weeks ago. And I think it's been a weird year. I think it's been a weirder year than most of the people watching this show and watching Badlands and engaging in the info war and following Trump, etc., believed, including many of us. That doesn't mean I feel negative about it, but I think that it's been different than a lot of us believed it would be. And that's really what I want to talk about tonight. And I think we're going to bring this into a pretty positive direction and reframe a lot of what the Golden Age is, not just in terms of what the Golden Age is, but what this era we're in right now is about, which is a transition era. And, maybe get some insights, some different ways of seeing these things than I can put into words and that you guys can. From our guest tonight, I'm going to be joined by Lieutenant General Steve Kwast in just a minute. Before I bring him on, I do want to thank the show sponsors tonight. Technically, I'm not a show sponsor, but I'm going to slip it in here that there's just like 2.5 hours left. If you guys want to support the Sword Punk campaign, it's ending in a couple hours. So badlandsmedia.tv/swordpunk. If you want to get that order in there, we will start processing that stuff in the next month and figuring all that out. Thank you so much to everybody who has supported that campaign. It has done enough to make it worthwhile doing. So you have helped me launch my own publishing company, and I'm excited to see where we go in the future. But for the next couple months, it's about making sure I actually do the thing I promised all of you I would do, which is get those orders together, get those books made, and get them shipped to all of you in the next few months. So that's the concentration. But last couple hours to get that in there. Otherwise, the show tonight is brought to you by our friends at River Financial. River Bitcoin. Did you know that Bitcoin is now a top 5 global asset? Now is the time to buy, and River's here to help. At River, you get 0-fee recurring buys, 3.8% Bitcoin interest on cash, US-based support, business accounts, and so much more. Don't forget about that interest on cash, which can accelerate your business growth too. Businesses can now earn 3.8% interest on cash paid in Bitcoin. That's more money to fuel your next big move. Get started at badlandsmedia.tv/river. Move your cash to River today and start earning a real interest rate with Bitcoin. The future is now. badlandsmedia.tv/river. Bitcoin is a funny thing. You guys have been obviously hearing G-Money talk about it for years, and some of us talk about it at Badlands. It's funny. Looking at the chart right now, what are we at? $108,000, and it feels like a catastrophic collapse in Bitcoin. And 6 months ago, we were at, where were we at? 80 grand. So anyway, perspective. Zoom out, dollar cost average. Don't stress about it. And our other sponsor is one that I was supporting before they were a Badlands Media sponsor. True America First company, one we have not used this season because Mrs. Bright needs to get Baby Bright out by the fire pit. But that is our friends at My Fireside. Fire up your backyard with My Fireside's epic Labor Day sale. Score an American-made fire pit forged from 100% heavy-gauge stainless steel, tough as nails, and built to last forever. Make it your own with customizable, interchangeable plates that scream you. Forget those lame, closed box competitors. My Fireside fire pits blast 360 degrees of cozy, radiant heat, warming up everyone in the crew. Proudly veteran-owned and operated. They even throw in a free pocket Declaration of Independence and a Constitution with every order, because nothing says America like freedom. Plus, every purchase fuels the Semper Fi and America's Fund, supporting our nation's heroes. Don't sleep on this. Through Labor Day, My Fireside Big Guy bundles are a blazing 25% off. Grab this red-hot deal before it's gone. Light up your nights. Spark the vibe of freedom at badlandsmedia.tv/fire. That's badlandsmedia.tv/fire. Guys, I have one of these. I told you I bought this thing full price like 3 years ago. I've got it outside like literally 20 feet away from me right now. It's awesome. It will never melt, obviously. It doesn't, it tempers. It's awesome stuff. And 25% off. I did not know they were doing that. So grab it, badlandsmedia.tv/fire. They know how fire works. And if you grew up camping with a dad who knows how to build fires, you will realize that most guys do not. Most guys smother their fires. And the makers of My Fireside understand that fires require oxygen coming in from all angles. That's what you get with these. So check it out, badlandsmedia.tv/fire. These are real America First guys. They've been supporting companies like ours for a long time. And without further ado, I've been trying to figure shit out all year, to varying success and failure. But tonight we've got a guy who's just going to tell us all the correct answers and where we've been going wrong. And that is Lieutenant General Steve Kwast. How you doing, General?
I'm doing well. I hate to disappoint you at the beginning, but I have no answers. I just have questions.
Yeah, well, that's what you'd have to say either way. We had a conversation on Friday, just a little bit of a table setter for tonight. So I've got some of those notes down here that we'll get into. You were on the show earlier this year. I think that was a good one. It always is. I'm going to hit us both with a little bit of a pivot to start out. Okay. Because we have some things we're going to talk about tonight. So for everybody in the audience, we're going to talk about sort of the new space race that's a narrative that's developing. Energy, sort of accelerationism. That's a lot of what I want to talk to the general about because of his unique expertise, and that's in this stuff. But since I know this kind of esoteric topic is going to get lost once we get into that, I want to hit it from the beginning rather than the end, which is just sort of what I said at the beginning there. It's very broad, but my feeling as somebody who's been kind of communicating with the audience, with this audience, and trying to engage in what we call the info war for a few years now, I think 2025 has felt different than maybe a lot of Trump supporters, Badlanders, info war people thought it would. And I guess what I mean by that is I don't feel negative. I'm still quite an optimistic person with what I feel is developing. But I suppose when you run a campaign on sort of a real zeitgeist change, which I think Trump and Patriots did, maybe you run the risk of not immediately transforming the country and having people be a little bit discouraged or confused as to maybe the tension that's going on. I think maybe part of that's the administration, part of that's the resistance that they are still fighting. But I wonder, just as a table setter, how do you feel about 2025? We're 3/4 of the way, 2/3 of the way through the year, in terms of just on the macro, the Trump administration and what they've been doing on an actual level, and whether or not you think that they've been effective at kind of communicating that on a narrative level to the American people.
Yeah, no, it's a great question to begin the conversation, and the way I would describe it simply is that President Trump ran on a brilliant plan, and that brilliant plan is what everybody got to see, and everybody made their own assumptions about how quickly that plan would unfold. But like any real execution of a plan, the enemy gets a vote. And so the way I see it is that President Trump delivered the plan. The American people accepted that plan, were excited about that plan. Everybody had their own expectations about how quickly that plan would unfold. And what President Trump has done is he has taken control now that he has the authority to make sure that the plan is unfolded in a way where we take into account the enemy activity, the administrative state, the deep state globally, and their efforts to subvert those of us that are trying to take back our freedom from a long-term plan that's been in play. So everybody's going to have a different sense of expectation. I think President Trump has done a good job of helping people understand that timing matters and that you cannot force the battle plan, that the enemy does get a vote. And if you don't have the flexibility to pivot and to adjust your timing or to nurture activity required to overcome an unexpected deviation in the enemy's activity, you're just going to fall on your own petard. So the art of victory is about watching your enemy and then unfolding the plan. And the way we say it in the military is, the plan means nothing, but planning is everything. And what that means is that if you don't do the thinking up front, which is what President Trump did, he did the thinking up front about what a good plan would be and what would the branches and sequels be if the enemy did this, if the enemy did that, for being prepared for the unexpected. And then the plan goes to shit as soon as you make contact with the enemy. But the planning allows you to know exactly what to do when the enemy does something that was unexpected, to be able to maintain your momentum that the ultimate victory will be achieved. So that's how I see it, that people will be disappointed because reality will be different than their expectations based on a plan that that was brilliant, but you never know how a plan will go once you make first contact with the enemy.
I think that's well said, and I think part of what I've been thinking about recently is maybe by definition, whether you're in full control of a plan or you're just attempting to implement a plan, if you're communicating that plan, by definition, you're essentially bringing the future forward, right? Like that's what planning is, right? No matter what you're talking about, if you're in the military, or if you're in your household and you're planning household finances, or you're going to, go for the presidency again, you are communicating something that doesn't exist right now. It, by definition, especially the second term, the third run, but the second public term of Trump, there's a constant communication process throughout 2024 and really from 2021 and beyond of everything that's going on right now is bad. We, the incoming Trump administration, are going to fix all these things. So do you think that, it's a simple thing, but do you think that is a difficult tightrope to walk? Speaking of the theme of the episode is all the tightropes Trump is walking. And maybe one of the hardest ones is one of the simplest ones, which is just simply, there are a lot of plans in motion, but in motion might be the key thing to get through your mind, right? In terms of these aren't things that happen in January of 2025. These are things that have been communicated and laid out, and certain things need to fall into place for that to happen. But when you're communicating that plan to a wide audience, you almost have to lose the nuance of that sort of argument, right? You kind of have to just make big promises and say, this is where we're going, and hopefully you're along for the ride.
Well, it is a tightrope, and the tightrope is that you cannot lose the faith and confidence of the people that have given you the power to win the fight. And in some cases, people can be convinced to be patient, and in other cases, people are not going to be convinced. So it is a tightrope, but the tightrope is not just one rope. It's not just maintaining the momentum of the American culture at believing that there is progress that's being made, that the outcomes of this plan are still the outcomes that we are going to achieve. And that just because it's not unfolding like I expected or you expected, that it has not, the whole thing hasn't fallen apart. So that's one tightrope of making sure the American people are aware. In doing that, it is, part of his brilliance is understanding human nature, and especially human nature that is manifested in a culture, a big group of people that all believe in the same principle. And in military leadership, we talk about it this way, but I think any great leader that talks about communication will say it. If you're leading a large organization, generally you have to use a megaphone to say a message that is simple and clear, and you have to say it about 76 times before it starts sinking into the cultural zeitgeist, if you will, to use your term, of the culture you're trying to lead. In other words, culture journeys are very slow, and the human, the totality of the humans that are part of that culture, most of them are slow to change, and they are slow to change their expectations. They're slow to change everything about the speed of the journey, and so it is a very difficult job for a leader to be, like President Reagan, the great communicator. And you're right. One of the techniques is to make the message so simple that it's clear, and that's one of President Trump's geniuses. But you take a very detail-oriented person, and they can pick apart a general statement that articulates the outcome you want to achieve, but is oversimplified, and say the guy is not, sophisticated. He's oversimplifying this. He is not being genuine. All of it is to not understand the art of communicating with a large group of people, all who have their own sovereign right to their own opinion about what should be happening and what is happening. So it is a tough tightrope, but that's just one tightrope. He's also walking the tightrope of his political adversaries within our culture, and he's walking the tightrope of international entities, civilizations, nations that are trying to knock him off the other two tightropes at every turn. So it is, 5G chess doesn't do it justice. Right? It is an extraordinarily sophisticated journey for President Trump that requires a deep understanding of human nature and how human nature unfolds in culture, in organizational behavior, and in geopolitics.
Yeah, that's well said as well. And I would say too, to not sound negative or like I'm dooming, I think, I feel good. I feel good about things. And I'm more commenting on maybe a larger kind of macro feeling. And one of the things we have the most difficulty with, or at least I do, in the kind of online battle space is, I think the most subversive element in the info war right now are people who, they kind of pretend to be pro-Trump and pro-MAGA, anti-establishment, but all they do is criticize everything the administration does all the time, right? And, maybe they get into more extreme rhetoric, like, oh, we're not going hard enough, we're not going far enough. I think it's a clever way to deploy narratives or undermine the administration because, when you engage with any of the arguments directly, let's say it's something like immigration or involvement in foreign conflicts, it's easy to say like, hey, the Trump administration said anti-interventionism, like this is your move. Then you do something like the Iran deployment or whatever else it is. You still munitions to Ukraine if you believe the narratives, etc. It's easy to poke holes in those things. But I think when you kind of dig into a lot of these commentators who are going after the administration right now, that are not your normal run-of-the-mill mainstream media or left-wing establishment that's always been against Trump, they're seizing on some easy short-term weaknesses. But if you kind of dig into, okay, well, what would you guys do? They start using a bit more direct rhetoric. They start talking about, well, we need real kinetic change. We need a more extreme kind of version of what Trump represents. And I think that's kind of an interesting development in 2025 because Trump used to be seen as the extreme reaction. And now you see him in there in 25, probably with more public mandate than he's ever had before. And yet there's this rising contingent saying it's not far enough.
Yeah.
We need to get more extreme. And, that seems like a bit of subversion to me. It's hard to tell if it's earnest or not, I guess is my point.
Yeah. So here's how I would describe that phenomenon because it's real. And this is, again, part of President Trump being very intuitive about the leverage that he has and how far he can push the culture. And in this case, I would say that in his first term, he did not have the leverage to be able to tolerate a stance that was more prudent. And therefore, he looked like he was the extreme, and there wasn't this voice that you're hearing now. Now he's got the leverage, and he can tolerate that voice because he's got to do what he's got to do to succeed. But here is my experience, having led very, very large organizations, and this is true to form. When you read the history of leaders that lead large organizations, and that is 20% of the people will love you no matter what you do. 20% of the people will hate you no matter what you do and will fight you at every turn. And the other 60% will go wherever the wind blows and wherever they think that they are going to be protected more. And so in this term, and what you're watching, I think, is the 20% that will always be critical of him, even within the MAGA movement.
Yeah.
20% that will always, be crabbing and complaining and trying to use the old Jedi mind trick, if you will, to try to trip him up and say, well, you stood for this, but now you're doing this, and therefore you're not being authentic. He can tolerate that now more because he's got the leverage to actually move out and do this in a prudent way. Because if you listen to those voices, you start degrading your own ability to achieve the outcome. Because again, those are complainers that will always complain, and there's always an element of truth to their complaint.
Yeah.
But a real leader does not, go where the wind blows. A real leader knows exactly what hill to take and how to take it, and he communicates to the culture so that they are willing to take the hill with him. And when they are willing to take the hill with him, he can tolerate the 20% that complain about this is the wrong hill, and you're right. Taking the wrong hill. And he's got the 20% that will always be with him, and then the 60% that see the momentum of the success. And he's got 80% of his movement behind him, and that's enough to avoid the 20% from derailing it.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes sense, and I think that that's observable. I think on a positive note, I think during the Biden era, I specifically noticed this during the lead up to the 2022 midterms. There was definitely a lot of intra-MAGA, intra-conservative jockeying going on of maybe some people on our side that smelled blood in the water and they thought the Trump era was over. Yeah. And it feels like they made a lot of their moves at that time. Like they made a lot of their public moves. The most infamous example of this that Chris Paul commented a lot at the time about the DeSantis sort of campaign. I don't know if he's good, if he's not good or anything like that. I just know that a lot of people who were pushing that campaign were representing themselves as MAGA while Trump is running for president, while they're endorsing an opponent to him, right? While talking about unity. And despite the fact that I am saying, yeah, there's some loud voices out there right now in 2025 on our side criticizing Trump at every turn, it does feel like a lot of the wind was taken out of their sails from a few years ago. And it felt to me like Trump baited a lot of that stuff out. Like it's almost like he got a lot of that intra-party, intra-movement opposition out of the system a few years ago. Maybe so he can kind of hit the ground running a little bit when he got back in there publicly.
I definitely think that that's part of it. I think that one of his real geniuses is being able to kind of ride the wave of chaos, where he can throw a little hand grenade into the dynamics, and he can see where people sit and where they stand. His famous comment that is so true for leaders, and that is, when you lose everything, you really find out who your friends are. Yeah. And he had the confidence and the strategic mind to be able to take advantage of that reality. And you're right, it did take the wind out of the sails that allows him to ride a little more smoothly right now. But what I would have people take a look at is how forgiving he is. He understands the human nature part of this. He understands how human nature unfolds in politics and how people who are self-interested will seize on anything they think will benefit their own self-interest. And he doesn't, he doesn't hold a grudge unless they are people that need to be brought to justice. He is able to allow this to play out. He is more strategic than the others, and therefore he benefits from a win as these unfold. But then he's willing to work with people, even though they were on the wrong side of history, because if there's something they can do to help with the cause, he'll take their help. And he doesn't take it personally. That thick skin, and I'll use the word humility, because that's a word a lot of people may not naturally jump to immediately when they think President Trump. But actually, that human characteristic of being able to allow the chaos of people's own self-interest and selfishness play out, and realize that it doesn't mean they're all bad or all good, and that there's good and bad in everybody, and then be able to embrace the good that they can contribute later on, and be forgiving of the fact that they, went off on a tangent that was not necessarily helping America, is a real sign of deep humility, where he doesn't take it personally. He doesn't get offended. He is here to do a job, and whoever can help him will help him, and whoever will not help him, he will find a way to work around.
Right. And before we get into some more specifics, I guess my last kind of macro questions related to this, which is we've talked about this, especially at GARTS. I noticed that this kind of rhetoric comes up a lot, but at Badlands in general, this idea of us trying to figure out what we're doing. When I say us, I don't just mean Badlands media hosts. I mean Americans. I mean people who are paying attention to this stuff in a way that when you go to the cookout, like I was at today, even people who like Trump, they're not really as engaged in this stuff as this audience is. And I guess there's a tightrope that I think we're walking, where we want to be sort of self-determining Americans. That's what a lot of us feel like, right? Sovereignty is a word that we use all the time. Donald Trump in the inauguration in 2017, and I think John's got that in the intro to the Devolution Power Hour. We are returning power back to you, the people. I think if there's a really earnest difficulty that the MAGA movement can have, it is balancing earnest criticism, real earnest criticism of what is going on in the government, in the administration, with the belief that these people are trying to do the right thing. They are trying to push forward an America First agenda. So it's less of a question, but I guess that for me personally, that's a tightrope I find difficult to navigate at times, of saying, wait, I feel very optimistic about the future. I really do. And about Trump and team. But there are times when I do wonder, Chris Paul again, and John says this as well, of thinking, man, do they want us to push back on this specific narrative because they're looking for that feedback loop? Are we interfering with them when we're pushing back on something? I guess that's the difficult tightrope I think a lot of America First people find themselves in when they're going, man, I don't really want to just be a cheerleader of everything the administration is doing, even though it's probably way better than what was being done in the past. But I wonder if maybe they are looking for some pushback in certain theaters because that grants them the public mandate to move forward. I wonder how you think about that.
Yeah,
almost how we can help the administration in that kind of way, rather than just push back on them.
Right. The way our founding fathers talked about this dynamic, I think, is the way that I've heard President Trump talk about it as well. And that is, we need vigorous debate, and we need pushback, and we need it to be organic. We need it to be, in households and neighborhoods and communities and states, arguing in a healthy, respectful way about these choices we have to achieve the outcomes, and to argue about the outcomes. What is it that we really want? And one of the things that I've noticed that gets in the way in America, having grown up in a different continent and in Africa, and then coming to America at a young age, one of the things that gets in our way with regard to this very question is that we tend to have narratives in our movies of heroes that are very self-sufficient, and the lone wolf, the John Wayne, and there's something great to be celebrated about that spirit of fierce maverick independence and self-sufficiency, where you don't need anybody because you can do it all on your own. So I applaud the celebration of that spirit, but the true human condition, as you study human nature and history, is that we really need one another, and we need institutions to help us perpetuate, so that not everybody has to be a genius and not everybody has to be a politician. You have to build a country that the young generation can take over, and they don't have to reinvent everything. Right. Because it's impossible to save the republic if you have to, if you don't have these institutions and this reality that we need one another. So let me bring this back to your central question. We do need to push back. We need to have these arguments. It is helpful, and we don't have to be lemmings just going along because we like the plan that was sold to us that we voted for in 2024. And that is healthy, and it will be respected and appreciated. But we also need to be careful not to go so far as to buy into the narrative of America that is a little antithetical to human nature and history, that we don't need any institutions and we don't need anybody but the individual. We do need the home, with one man and one woman, as the mother and father of children. We are just built to be moral creatures, and and to raise a healthy child requires the differences between men and women that are inherent, that we should celebrate, equal but different. And then all the way through the neighborhoods, arguing healthily about these things. And then that helps us hold our politicians accountable. So let's have those vigorous debates. Let's argue. Let's depart friends when we're done arguing, and realize that it takes time to settle on a decision that we can all live with.
Yeah, and I think that can be where there can be some odd tension when you really get really deep into the info war, when you really are deeply involved and passionate about trying to read the war beneath the war, trying to understand what's going on, feeling crazy half of the time, is that you'll find yourself going down rabbit holes and saying, hey, I'm trying to push toward what I think is right and what I think the administration and Donald Trump might be trying to push us toward. But then you'll get a lot of pushback from people that are on the same side, that are saying, like, you're disrupting the plan, you're disrupting what they're trying to do, etc. But with your explanation, it makes me think of kind of a epiphany I came to last year, which is I went through my libertarian phase after I was a liberal, voting for Obama, etc., and then felt like I had woken up and went through kind of my libertarian anarchist phase. And I think a lot of libertarians are logical. I think a lot of them are moral too. I think they're good at diagnosing the problem. But to your point, I've joked in my brash manner that once you grow up, you become a libertarian and then you grow up. And what I mean by that is, as I'm growing up, I'm understanding, there is a reason that we started forming societies. There is a reason that we started forming family units and village units and town units and national units, right? And it feels like, man, like that rhetoric is still just lost on so many 2025 libertarians who sit there, and whether they're talking about Bitcoin or only, elections or left-right paradigm, etc. And it's like they seem to miss that realism of, if the other guys know that you've got stuff they want, They're going to come over the hill at some point and take the stuff from you, right? Like there are practical, not just moral reasons of why we did create these cooperative organizations, etc.
Yeah.
And maybe sometimes we can get easily funneled into this anti-system everything, right? If anything is a system, it's bad. You can understand why we can feel that way, but maybe we need to remember why there were systems. So speaking of tightropes, maybe that's the biggest one Trump is navigating right now, is we're reforming the system, we're dismantling aspects of the system, but we do need systems to have a strong and functioning society.
Yeah, it's true. We do. And so, you know, a couple of comments on that. One is that the wisdom and the prudence and the humility to be able to compromise, you know, as you are having these dialogues about outcomes and principles and values and politics, is really important. You know how much fun it is to have a discussion with somebody that is so hardcore about their opinion that if you oppose their opinion, you become the enemy. I mean, we see that all the time. Then they attack you, and there's no compromise. And then you find also people who have not really lived enough life or lived in enough places in the world to realize this reality about human nature, that we need each other desperately, more than we can live as individuals. And that we need institutions to help us survive, or at least to protect our values, because eventually somebody, like you said, will come over the hill and take them. And so, you know, there's another leadership lesson in this for those. And again, you're not going to convince somebody that has that voice that they need to soften their ardent, dogmatic opinion that it's my way or the highway. You're not going to change them, but life experience will. Understanding human nature will. The more they reflect on their interior life, most people will start coming to the realization that it's not just all about me and my liberty. Because rules do help. And one of the examples is if you put a bunch of cars out in the middle of like a big parking lot with no lines, and then you tell everybody to go wherever they want, you're going to have some trouble. But if you have a nice line where you say just stay on the right hand side of the line, now you can drive as fast as you want, and you're not going to hit anybody. So rules are actually helpful if they're the right kind of rules, and more importantly, the way we structure these institutions. It's really about asking that question: what is the minimum amount of system organization that you need to achieve the reason why it exists? And in this case, it's national survival, that there are other civilizations out there that will pool their funds and their resources, and they will come at you in a way where an individual or a small group of individuals will not be able to defend themselves physically. Okay. Yeah. In the digital world, maybe you can, but this goes back to something else that's really important about leadership, but it really applies to anybody in America, and that is, anytime you are looking at something that somebody else built, let's say our founding fathers or even the generation before us, it is very important to understand that before you tear it down, you better damn well sure understand why it was put up. And this goes back to humility, because the people that put it up are as smart as you are. Okay. They were as fiercely independent as you are. They were as wonderfully educated as you are. And they put it there for a reason. And my favorite example is something that Father Mike Schmitz does on his Bible in a year, which he kind of goes through the whole Bible in 20 minutes on the podcast a year. And his example of this, because people will say, why the hell do I even want to pay attention to the 10 Commandments? And his example is this leadership lesson that let's say you bought a plot of land on this beautiful mountaintop with cliffs all around the edge, and somebody had a fence around the cliff edge, and you went in there and you said that is really ugly. Tear it down. And then and then your kids go out there, play, and one falls off the cliff and dies, and you're like, shit, now I know why the fence was there. So it bodes well for us as a civilization as we are moving from this industrial age to this digital age, and all of the institutions that are going to be reinvented and restructured, to really spend some time thinking about, why does the institution exist? And do we still need it? That's a fair question. Or do we need to modify it? That's a fair question. And how can we minimize it so that it does as little harm as it's also doing what it was built for, its purpose, which usually was a good thing because smart people built it.
I love that explanation. And I think, it makes me think of, I was going to ask about the administrative state, and that's a perfect segue into it. Because strangely, as fiercely independent as I feel, and maybe like even more so, the more I go into this, the more kind of sovereign maximalist I feel.
Yeah.
And yet, a strange thing has been happening to me where I am more, I don't know how to even say this. I am more okay with a strong and powerful president of the United States than I even was a few years ago, despite the fact that I wanted Trump to be president, etc. And I think it gets to some of what you're saying here, which is that one of the most encouraging things I'm seeing out of 2025 is that I feel that if Trump has set his sights on anything really publicly and really directly this year, it has been the administrative state. Like we talk about the deep state, we talk about RICO, hopefully a lot of that finds resolution. Yeah. But in terms of just public, even Normieville is understanding, the current administration is challenging the existence of the administrative state. And in a roundabout way, what I mean by my changing perceptions on presidential power is, while the left and opponents to Trump and what they're doing are freaking out and saying dictator, emperor, etc., it's funny because it's making me think, no, they are trying to get things closer to the American people. As in, we can't vote for the IRS in a direct manner, right? We can't vote for the Federal Reserve. That's a current narrative out there. We have nothing to do with the CDC. We're several head hops removed from all of these institutions that directly govern our lives, directly govern us, in a way that the president does not. But we can vote for the president, leaving aside election issues for the sake of discussion. And it's really making me think, do you think that's part of, besides the literal trying to rein in the administrative state, is part of what Trump and team are doing is trying to bolster presidential power, but because that is getting that power much closer to the American people, whereas the administrative state has basically existed to siphon that power away from the president, which is really siphoning that power away from everybody who's voting for the president.
So I would say that the answer to that question is really a degree of balance. Because the administrative state has morphed into such an unrecognizable beast that this is why you have people saying that if the founding fathers were alive today, they would not recognize the republic. That the whole purpose for those institutions has ballooned into something that is now a predatory state, not just an administrative state, but a predatory state. And the whole purpose of the president has been diluted. And one of the reasons why I think we all intuitively like a strong president is because it does something that the entire federal government was primarily built to do. It strikes fear in the hearts of our enemies and reassurance in the hearts of our friends. And that is part of the deterrence that prevents war, but that also the preparation for the capability to hold at arm's length anybody that would think about physically coming or virtually coming into America and stealing our values or our sovereignty or our goods and services will be defeated. That's the purpose of the government. It is not to do all these other things that the administrative state has grown to do over time. And they've done a brilliant job of hiding themselves from the American people, grabbing a hold of their throats and choking them out because they are no longer serving the common good, even though they will broadcast that they are. So this is intentional, in my opinion. And it's one of the reasons why we are so lucky that President Trump understands the grand strategy of what has happened over the last 250 years and the grand strategy of how to untie this Gordian knot in a way that does not precipitate violence. That's a really important point we can go into separately if you want, but this is part of the wisdom, and this is part, back to your first question, of why the temporal dimension of this journey, meaning the timing of what's going on and how quickly things are happening, and how sometimes it is frustrating because your expectation was one thing and the timing is another. This is why the timing is so important, so that we do not start tripping on violence as a component of this journey.
Right. Well, I think related to this, some of the actual moves that Trump seems to be making in terms of there's the USAID stuff early on, some of the Doge deployments, the IRS, the Federal Reserve. There's all these different sort of fronts in the maybe war between the administration and the administrative state.
Yeah.
Maybe tangential to this, very recent developments that I think are really interesting are some of the financial moves being made with what I would call the American oligarchy, which is your Intels of the world, your Apples, your Samsung. Some of these are foreign, but the Intel deal, for example, was a big thing. Yeah. And I think really interesting because from a traditional conservative, maybe even libertarian bent, you would you'd maybe be a little nervous when you see the federal government taking 10% of one of our biggest companies. There's a lot of theories in this community of what might be going on there, right? But even from a surface level, I'm wondering how you see moves like that. There wasn't just Intel. There was the DoD was investing in MP Minerals, MP Materials, strategic companies involved in highly strategic materials, businesses, industries.
Yeah.
That seems like another tightrope that the Trump administration is navigating. How do you see what they're doing there and how they're translating that maybe in a way of saying, yeah, we're not being dictators, but these are strategically important things for the American people to be directly involved in?
Yeah, here's the lens through which I view some of these activities that you just mentioned. And it goes back to something, President Trump hasn't talked deeply about this in his campaign or, in his rallies, but he has talked about it privately with a number of people. And ever since the Westphalian model of nation states have been around, there is a certain rhythm to the governance of a nation, okay? The institutions that have governed nations that have grown into this behemoth that we have now. One of the things President Trump is ushering in is a new model for the governance of a republic that does not diminish the brilliance of our Constitution or change. In fact, it goes back to the original Constitution, which is really a minimalist government. But it is changing the footing of government to run like a business. Because before the digital age, and I would say that, if I had to put a year on it, I would say by 1980, there was a fundamental change that really the government has never caught up to. And that fundamental change is that the private market will forever innovate more rapidly and be more agile and flexible at adjusting to market forces than the government. And that before 1980, the government was able to actually own the design and the thinking and the hardware and the software and the all of the mechanisms, the tools of statescraft, whether it's the Department of Defense or other entities. They were able to own them, and this great arrogance, if you will, that the government knows best. For those that were studying the arc of history and national security, this recognition that never again will a government be able to move fast enough to keep up with innovation in the free market. And so what you are watching, I believe, is the beginnings of a U.S. government that relates differently to the private sector. And that dual use technologies, it goes back to something for me as a fighter pilot that was the mantra of the fighter pilot community, and that is speed is life. And now as a business person and as an entrepreneur, having been in the leadership of 2 startups in America, I can talk about this from the national security side as a general officer in charge of bringing capability from the industrial benches of America to the warfighter, and now as an entrepreneur building capability for the economy. This is changing the way government does public-private partnerships so that they basically take their problem and they turn to the private sector and say, fix my problem. And if there is not a market or the business case cannot close, that only then and only then does the government put their thumb on the scale and provide the resources to make sure that we move faster than our adversaries. And this conversation here can get into the space race 2.0 and the other tightropes that President Trump is walking geopolitically across the globe. But this is one of the things I see when you talk about Intel and you talk about some of these other acts. It is the beginning of a closer relationship where we tell the private sector, we know you are innovative. We know you can move faster. We need your help. And if America can ride the leading edge like a surfer, the leading edge of this wave of innovation that is accelerating in the digital age with AI and quantum and all the other things that are going to continue to speed up the pace of life, we will be the forever winners, because speed is life, and the speed of innovation is life to our security, whether it's digital or physical. And that's what I see happening with these points. They fit within this larger intent of being the first country in the world to ever design a government that actually takes advantage of the private sector.
It's well said. My Italian Boston trainer, Mario Mastro, he used to tell me when I was scoping opponents, speed kills, is what he told me every time. Don't worry about the big guy. Don't worry about the savvy guy. Worry about the fast guy. That's who you got to be looking out for. So I love that. But yeah, it also makes me think there's a little bit of rewiring going on cognitively, or sort of mass psychologically with the Intel deal in particular. One of the things I loved about that was that, as far as I understand, there was all this money was allocated for a federal grant. And essentially what the Trump administration did, what we're told, is that they essentially took that amount of stake in Intel, of saying, hey, if you're going to get this X billion dollar grant, we're going to take this degree of stake in the company. What's being miscommunicated by idiots in the media is that acting like the government is seizing this stake. Intel sold the stake to the government, right? Like that's, people are kind of, hey, maybe there's other stuff going on here, right? But in terms of the public narrative, Intel sold this stake to the federal government for this grant. And maybe retroactively, part of what's going on here is a little bit of disclosure of saying, yeah, the government has been like shoveling out grants for decades, but the American people are not getting any stakes in any of these companies, right? And you've been involved in this space in that world in general of companies that do business with the federal government. And I guess it was a weird epiphany to have of saying, wait a second, yeah, I guess doesn't it make sense where usually you invest X billions or millions of dollars into a company and you get some kind of stake in that company rather than just saying blindly investing in this company is good for the country? Do you think that's part of what they're doing too, of saying, hey, if you want to play this game, private company X, and you want the federal money, the American people have a stake in your company. That's how this is going to work from now on.
Yeah. Well, that's the business model. I mean, and so two good things happen. One, Intel gets to accelerate the innovation that's going to protect our country and protect American people. And two, your taxes go down because the government is now getting, revenue from that company, and it can offset taxes as long as you are, you can trust that you're voting for a person that's going to be honest and not just take it and pocket it. So it is a win-win, but it fits right in this model of changing the entire mindset and structure of the government into a business and thinking about this like a business so that we can move faster than our enemies. And you're right, in physics, velocity squared, every excess piece of velocity in a dynamic, it has, a squared value of impact. So speed does kill and speed is life.
Yep. Oh yeah. Fighting fast guys is not fun. Fighting big guys is not that big of a problem like people think. It's fast guys that you do not want to fight.
I learned that in the boxing ring at the Air Force Academy.
Oh yeah, yep. You learn to be scared of the quick little wiry guys because they'll hit you before you can see anything coming. Well, on this topic, you mentioned the space race. So one of the sort of main thing that I've had you in my head for weeks is I'm big on pattern recognition. Sometimes I'm seeing patterns that aren't there. Sometimes I'm seeing patterns that are there. One of the patterns that keeps coming up, I'd say it's twofold, but I think it's the same thing, is underneath all the Russia, US, will they, won't they, either become best friends or bitter enemies, US, China, etc. There's this narrative being seeded into the mainstream of a new space race. Mainly, I'm seeing this between the US, Russia, and China. Tangential to this, another narrative I'm seeing is a nuclear race. And a lot of times these are being interchanged with each other. And we talked about last time you were on the show, a narrative in 2024 I was fascinated with has been just nuclear energy, the reemergence of that, the sort of reframing of nuclear, the word nuclear in the American zeitgeist. And my mind goes in certain directions when I think of this new space race, especially under the context of I believe there is some level of cooperation. I use the term sovereign alliance, but at the very least, I believe there's some level of cooperation and communication going on between somebody like Donald Trump, Vladimir Putin, and Xi Jinping. Obviously, opinions vary there. But I wonder what does the new space race and the new energy race, the nuclear race, kind of mean to you? And second, does the concept of competition and a race in these fields, does it contradict the idea of a sovereign alliance or of cooperation or not? Is there a way to have both, to have the best of both worlds, I guess?
Yeah, so this really fits the theme of Tightrope because all of them are true to some degree or another. And so let me just address them one at a time and then kind of bring them together. There's no question that the technology that has unfolded in the last number of years has revealed that space will be the ultimate high ground. And so without getting into details on it, I'll just tell your listeners that as an astronautical engineer that has studied space and technology my whole life and studied geopolitics and power competition between nation states, that the economy of space will dwarf air, land, and sea combined. That we are at this juncture in history where we now have the technology, even though we have not yet built the infrastructure or the logistics to do it, but we have the technology that has been proven to be able to tap into almost unlimited, low-cost energy, information, and resources coming from the heavens. And we don't have to scar the earth or fight over the land that has the rare earth metals, or for water rights or water sources, or many of the other things that are the kindling for war and conflict amongst nations. So that reality that space will be the ultimate high ground to deliver information to you that you can trust, energy to you that you can afford, and resources to you that you can't access unless you were to go to some far reaches of the earth and bring it back. And that the logistics of that high ground will make it cheaper than air, land, and sea to get lithium from South America to, let's say, Zimbabwe. So that's the first layer here, is that there is a real race underway for the first country to really truly tap into the logistics of this new economy that's coming at us like a freight train, because the revenue from that marketplace is in multi-trillions of dollars. When you think about the energy market, the information market, and the resource market that can be delivered to anybody on the globe for the same price point. And you can mine it in space, whether it's the energy, you can deliver it from space if it's the information, and you can create it in space if it's the energy. And so that's the first level. So there is a true race, and this is why President Trump was the first president that had the guts to actually build a space force.
Right.
And get Congress to put it into law so it could not be reversed. History books will, you can mark this down as one of, I don't predict history because nobody does a good job of it, but I'll predict that in 300 years from now, they will write that the decision to create a space force was the wedge in history that protected America. And it would be like, the Federalist Papers and the argument over whether we should have a Navy or not have a Navy. Had they decided not to have a Navy, I don't think the War of 1812 would have gone the way it did.
Right.
And then on and on and on. So the Space Force is extremely important, because without some force to enforce the rule of law in space, the rule of the economy in space, the line in the road that says drive on the right side so everybody can do their thing safely. Without that space force, entrepreneurs will not go there quickly, because entrepreneurs are good at making risk decisions. And the only people that will go there are people that don't have, rule of law or do not believe in the fact that if you work for something and put in the risk, you deserve the fruits of your labor. That's right. Our free market, and it's our open society. That's that's the system that we live in, that other countries in the world do not live in. So it's important that we win this race. So the second layer of this that you talked about is the sovereign alliance and the competition. And I'll bring the nuclear piece into this too, because if you noticed and you listened carefully, when Steve Witkoff was talking with the Russians just before President Putin and President Trump met in Alaska, Steve Witkoff came away from that meeting and they said, there are two things that we are cooperating on and working on together, and that is energy and space. Okay. And so the nuclear term, though, has a wonderful dual use benefit for President Trump. One is the weapon word that people, when you say nuclear, they think weapon. And the other is energy. When you say nuclear, they think energy. Okay. Those are both simultaneous reactions from a whole host of different people, depending on their history, experience, and understanding. And the answer is he means both. But then before we get any further on that question, because it is a question, what do you mean when you say nuclear, and what does this all mean? The second piece of this is the fact that President Trump is a really, really astute student of history and student of human nature. And a student of history, when I say that, I mean how human nature and then ideology evolve into politics and then geopolitics. And when you study that over generations of civilizations, most progress does not get made in a timely manner if there is not a population that's motivated by a sense of, oh my God, we're going to be screwed if we don't do something.
Right.
Okay. But for America, it has an extra boost, and that is we do not like to lose. Okay. Americans do not like to lose. So President Trump is on the right side of history on every narrative that actually motivates rapid progress. He is setting up a situation where we are cooperating to move quickly with countries that are also interested. He is creating competition so that the American people are waking up to the fact that there's a space race going on and there's a nuclear race going on, both for weapons and energy. And then President Trump's secret weapon and our superpower as Americans, where our free market and our engineers and scientists innovate faster than any other culture on the planet, hands down. And it's because we are culturally free to innovate. And it is not the same in China or in Russia. And they are envious of us, that attribute. And they fear us for that. And they are fast followers because of it. And that's why you see China having rocket ships that look like Elon Musk's and chopsticks that will capture their rockets that look just like Elon Musk's, and their fighter jets look just like our F-22s and F-35s, and on and on and on and on. Right. So this is the trifecta of the space race 2.0 and the nuclear race. And here's what's, if I had to guess, here's what's going to happen with nuclear. The energy side of that conversation and the space side of being able to defend from space, the Golden Dome, will make nuclear weapons something that we can get rid of safely. And that if anybody on this planet is interested in developing a nuclear weapon, they will be discovered and they will be eliminated so fast it'll make your head spin, because there are more good people that realize the danger of nuclear weapons, that know that there is a way of getting rid of them. You'll never get rid of the science and the fact that somebody could build one, but you will make it so costly and you will be able to detect with such precision in all of the tools of discovery that we are creating in this information warfare, this age of information, that we can make it almost impossible for somebody to create and then utilize a nuclear weapon. And if they do, they will be literally run off the earth with a pitchfork by the rest of the human race.
I want to get deeper into the space race, but the nuclear angle has been randomly, or I guess I couldn't have predicted heading into 2024 that would be the thing that for some reason just like captured my attention more than anything else. And I think what happened was in 2023, I guess the way my mind works is I tend to look at sort of what I consider the enemy. I look at their narratives all the time, and I look for patterns in the narratives they are setting. And then I try to look at how is Trump and team responding to those patterns, etc. And one of them that I noticed in 2023 was this resurgence in nuclear scaremongering, right? Scare narratives revolving around the word nuclear. Yeah. That could be Korea. We were dealing with that years ago. Russia, for sure, in recent years. 2023, I mean, the biggest movie of the year, or at least one of the biggest, Oppenheimer, Christopher Nolan, right? You've got, and it wasn't just, we know about the Manhattan Project, etc. But I just thought the timing was so curious. I'm thinking like 2023, why now? Why are we doing a massive, billion-dollar blockbuster, Academy Award-winning nuclear Armageddon movie in 2023? And it's coming right on the heels of Russia's going to get us and the Chinese are going to get us. And I guess it sent me down this rabbit hole of thinking, speaking of tightropes, the nuclear one, with everything you just said, seems to be one of the most difficult needles for Trump and team to thread. Because by the same token, maybe my generation, the generations like one or two before me, I think when you say nuclear now, most people think negative. I might be wrong about that, but I would hazard a guess. I know a lot of Gen X people have told me about the hiding under the desks and all that kind of stuff at school. I didn't have that in school. But when you say nuclear to me, I'm probably going to think of a mushroom cloud before a battery. Yeah. But then I think in the 40s, etc., you say nuclear and people are probably going to think Jetsons and flying cars, right? Mm-hmm. So I started to get interested in that, of thinking, is this one of the most difficult tightropes they have to walk, of saying there are actual logical reasons to take this kind of energy and technology very seriously, especially in the hands of our enemies. But I've called it the Eisenhower-Kennedy timeline. Eisenhower and Kennedy, when I've looked back on their communications in recent years, were extremely bullish and excited about nuclear. Yeah. And then we saw a very hard pivot on that narrative with Lyndon Johnson and beyond. I wonder what you think of that pivot. And again, balancing that of saying, is that one of the tightropes they're walking, of how do we reverse engineer and say, nuclear energy needs to be taken seriously, but it also might be vital to kind of getting us back to maybe the path we were supposed to be on a long time ago.
Yeah, well, I think it is getting us back on the path that we could be on. But it takes time to untie this knot that has been formed since that hard right turn that has put us in such danger as a human race. And so that's why, I'm so grateful for the prudence of President Trump. He's not going to let go of our strength until, this cultural journey takes place. And it oftentimes takes generations. But one of the ways that you can usher in this solution, and I'll just state it simply, even though it will unfold, in ways we can't even predict. But once you demonstrate to the world these small nuclear reactors that are safer to you than, I like to say, one of the engineers that is an expert in this will say, we have come so far with how well we can manage the nuclear energy release that the odds of your kitchen table going off high order at the molecular level is a greater potential than a small nuclear reactor becoming problematic, whether it's heat or otherwise, or radiation. So we have learned how to control it. So the first step is to help expose the world to the fact that nuclear power is clean and it is brilliant at doing everything we need to do to uplift the human condition. And it can be used in space, it can be used on Earth, it can be used anywhere. And it is a tremendous blessing to the human race. It will bring more prosperity, peace, and health to the human race. Then, so that is one journey we're on to reintroduce the world and the human race to what nuclear can do to help. Then the second is the space layer. And the terrestrial layer, where we can stop anybody that would in the future launch a missile, we can see it and we can stop it before it gets even outside of the geographic boundary of the place it was launched, okay, from space. And so now we have the capability, and again, the warmongers will claim that this is destabilizing, but but again, this is why America having that high ground first is really important. But ultimately, then you start ushering in the capability to detect anybody anywhere on the planet that starts even tinkering with nuclear, and stop them before they can do anything. And that capability is also already here. So, building out the capability to reintroduce nuclear as something that can be positive and beautiful for the human race, and with no danger because of the way we know how to manage it, and the technology to be able to basically make obsolete any missile systems that are designed to be weapons, because they will be ineffective. The moment you launch it is the moment it will die, and it will be dying right over your head where you launched it, if you're the one that launched it. Right. And then anybody building like a nuclear backpack, the detection of that in a way where it's almost impossible to do, because the good people on the planet are ganging up on those that would use it as a weapon. Now you can start seeing a future where nuclear weapons are no longer this guillotine hanging over the neck of humanity as we've been living with since World War II.
It's interesting, in the Dune universe, sci-fi universe, one of the things that people who don't read the books didn't understand in the movies is they're like, why, if they have these crazy weapons, why aren't they just, why are they all fighting with swords? And the idea in that fictional world is that they developed this shield technology where the shield would respond and reflect whatever kinetic energy was coming at it. Yeah. So it was like this, it was like this magical deterrent where if you launched a nuke at somebody wearing that shield, everybody was dead. Yeah. And I guess in the under the framing of the Sovereign Alliance or theories of that, etc., I guess, we touched on this when we spoke a few days ago, but when you're talking about nuclear weaponry, nuclear energy, and specifically nuclear deterrence, is it important to try to get outside of the American mindset for the sake of argument and say, this is one of the most difficult tightropes to navigate? If for the sake of argument, Trump and Putin and Xi, they're the Trinity. And it's not just because I theorize that. They're the three most powerful nations in the world, right? I think everybody would largely agree on that, probably by orders of magnitude. And maybe the US is a step above. But from their perspective, if you are going to enter this new multipolar world where one power is not dominating everybody, do you think that there is room for some sort of cooperation on denuclearization here? And I guess a follow-up on that would be, from my perspective, it feels to me like the era of signing treaties and making pinky promises with other nations might be coming to an end. Hey, we won't nuke you if you don't nuke us. What you're talking about with space and how it relates to nuclear, it's making me think, is there an actual way we could cooperate and say, we're all going to compete with each other in this new realm, but we're all also going to be in a position where we know that nuclear disarmament has de facto occurred because all of these major nations are going to be able to do what you're talking about, right? Of disarming these. I wonder what you think of that. Is it something that it feels like the US is going to dominate exclusively, or is there an advantage to Russia and China not feeling like we could just nuke them if we wanted to because we have better space technology?
Yeah, no, this is why I said we can't know how this will unfold, but there is no question that that is a better outcome when you when you have a mindset where every country can feel safe and be prosperous and be healthy. It is never good when you create a dynamic where a country will feel perpetually insecure. It's not healthy for the whole of the human race. And so, yes, that outcome is exactly what would be a wonderful outcome. How that unfolds is tricky, because you also have to factor in that human nature. If things turn in the wrong direction, you can have a country that can take advantage of that in a way that. And culturally, this is another thing that most Americans do not really have their hard time wrapping their brains around the fact that the Chinese don't really care about deterrence in the nuclear conversation like Americans do. And it goes back to a classic quote from Mao Zedong, go ahead and nuke us. This is to Eisenhower. Go ahead and nuke us. You kill 1 billion people. We'll just come back with more.
Right.
Yeah. So anyway, I think that would be a wonderful outcome. But fundamentally, it's about this idea that a better path is for China to feel safe and prosperous and healthy. Russia, and don't count, India, and every country on the planet, no matter how small or how large. This is what you hear in President Trump's speeches, especially the one in Saudi Arabia, which I think is one of the, again, he's taken us along slowly, so that the cultural journey is acceptable and people don't go tilt. But this man believes in the dignity of every human being, no matter where they live, but is acutely aware and savvy of these ideologies that murder human beings when they finally come to their full fruition, like communism and socialism, where it's about the control of people. And controlling people is antithetical to the way God made us, and it will never, ever stand. So it's a brilliant plan. It's the tightrope of, it's 6 tightropes, really, when you count them all up, when you talk about the space race and nuclear, and these other countries, and the way the world could evolve to a more peaceful, stable situation where you'll still have evil, you still have to be strong, you cannot be a weakling, but if enough strong people are sovereign, we can gang up on those people that are evil and have a fighting chance of never letting this globalist administrative state enslave us the way we are enslaved right now.
On that note, some conversations I've had privately, maybe a little bit publicly, with our own Matt Arrett, who was at Deadwood, our Canadian boy.
I know.
He's done some great writing about previous agreements and plans that were in place between the U.S. and Russia, specifically in the late 1800s, late 1800s, early 1900s, specifically around the Arctic, trans-Arctic railway, I believe, sort of these sort of things. So when Trump and Putin agreed to meet in Russia near the Bering Strait, there was a lot of right-wing media that immediately was jumping on that and saying Trump is intimidating Putin and that's what he's doing. Because I'd been biased in terms of the sovereign alliance theory, but also because of my conversations with Arrett, the first thing I thought of was this feels like a signal to what you're talking about. I guess a pathway of how can we both be strong, the US and Russia, both want to be stronger than the other and have this competition, but also cooperate. And I mentioned patterns earlier. One of the narrative patterns I also have noticed in the last year is in between the escalatory rhetoric of Trump, Putin, Sergei Lavrov, Steve Witkoff. Witkoff's not a very escalatory guy. He's pretty chill.
Yeah.
But, you know, Lavrov, Medvedev gets a little uppity sometimes. He gets a little dramatic. You'll see buried in the article on RT, we're really excited about joint economic projects in the future, right? And I kept keying in on that and going, this feels like they know we're not going to nuke each other anytime soon. But speaking of those joint economic projects, meeting at the Bering Strait, etc., do you think that they are signaling some of these things? Do you think that it's not just shaking big sticks at each other? Do you think they are talking about, you know, I guess another way to put this would be there is a logic to intertwining in some way with the Russian Federation to reduce the chances of conflict with them, but avoiding globalism, right? That's another tightrope. How do we cooperate with them and maybe reconcile a bit without kind of devolving into this NATO, EU, systemic globalist crap that we've been dealing with for the last couple generations?
Yeah. Well, you are, it's really fun to watch you be able to kind of figure out what's going on in your method. But this is exactly what's happening under the radar. And it's this foundational recognition. And this is historic. I mean, you take a look at, again, as a student of history and economics, the more you cooperate economically, the less likely you are going to go to war. And so space is like one of the most sexy cooperative environments. Look at the International Space Station. Even when we were fighting with each other, cosmonauts and astronauts were enjoying each other's company and working together on the space station. When they had a crack on their side, we fixed it for them, and we had problems not being able to get there. They took our astronauts there for us, and it was a wonderful thing in the midst of the Cold War and tensions beyond the Cold War. And so space is a platform for peace. All economic, and this is why energy and space were mentioned with Steve Witkoff when he was meeting in Russia, that these are the platforms for peace and cooperation. If we can cooperate on resources, not just energy, but all resources, and space is that platform for peace and prosperity between our nations, and that's what they want to build. And yes, we need to each be strong, because if America is weak, or if we have a weak president that does not know how to conduct herself or himself with dignity and strength, the Russians will walk all over us. I mean, that's just culturally their way. If you're weak, again, I was fortunate enough to really get to know the Russians well, because I was the general officer on the Joint Staff in charge of Russia policy and strategy for Russia, NATO, and Europe for the chairman. And so my trips to Russia and getting to know the Russians was just such a blessing in my life. And they're more like us than the Germans or the English. I mean, people don't realize this, but they're closer to us ideologically and the way we think about the world than most other nations on the planet. But they teach their children how to be fighters. They teach their children how to be strong. They do not coddle their children. Their children learn how to fight, and they better be tough. And they really disrespect weakness. And so
yes, they do.
They struggle with our American culture. You get a surfer boy from Southern California that's now a diplomat that's trying to negotiate, and they're all lovey-dovey. The Russians just are going to walk out. It's just not going to work. So this is where President Trump really understands the art of the deal, that it's about meeting your adversary or your competition where they're at, understanding how they talk and what they value and what they respect, and then going in with a position of power and leverage, but being fair and not getting your hurt feelings if they walk out. It's just beautiful. And so the answer to your question is yes, that is what's going on. That's what they're signaling. And that's why they don't get upset and we don't get upset when you see the escalations. because it's all on a foundation of economic cooperation.
Absolutely. It's funny. I've mentioned on the shows before, but not high leverage negotiations. But I trained with Russians in North Boston, and that was very life changing for me. And at the beginning, it was very negative because I was very pissed at them because I felt they were disrespecting sparring etiquette. So you would spar, and they'd hit you at full speed. And my first day there, I got in a brawl with one of these guys, tearing each other up, and ended up becoming good friends with the head trainer there, who was a Russian. And he was kind of explaining to me, like, this isn't the way it is in Russia. There's no, like, we're going to agree to kind of hit each other a little bit to make each other better. He was saying he's respecting you by hitting you this hard. He's taking you seriously. And yeah, once you understand that, you're like, okay, so you're not trying to destroy me. You're trying to respect me in this exchange. But yeah, I find it fascinating. It's almost like we're seeing a geopolitical version of that, where, the demeanor of Putin, even to the normie sphere, is that, I say this to normies who don't like Trump, my Canadian in-laws, etc. If I buy all of their narratives about Orange Man bad and about Vladimir Putin's this evil dictator, well, who do you want in the room with these guys, right? It's kind of one of these simple things it comes down to at some point. Yeah. Don't you want the guy? Who do you want in the room with the evil, bad, strongman Vladimir Putin? Justin Trudeau or Donald Trump? And that one kind of stumps a lot of normies, even the ones that don't like Donald Trump. They kind of will sit there and go, well, there might be something to that idea of walking into these rooms as somebody with respect.
Yeah, no, it's true. And we could go on a whole show on the Russian culture and what's, how much respect we should have for it, but also to not lose our uniqueness. I mean, Americans, we may have a softer side, but there's value in that too, because it can border on abuse in some cases, the kind of act, for a young kid in Russia, if you're, in America, there's a lot more room for somebody who is not naturally aggressive or is not a natural born fighter. But in Russia, you are not as welcome if but they live in a condition that is so much harsher than America. And they have a history, of suffering where they literally embrace suffering as a badge of honor and nobility. That just isn't the way Americans are wired. But anyway, so we won't go much further into that. Suffice it to say, though, Russia recognizes that they are more like us than anybody else, that they have been our friends since the beginning of our country, and that Americans have been lied to by a generation of politicians. And it's going to take President Trump some time to untie that tie, but untie that knot rather, but they're not going to slow down on this cooperation because it's so essential. And the same is true with China. It's so essential for these countries to be sovereign, but in the end, we better win, and we better be damn strong, or they will hit us at full speed, and we will be a second-rate country if we aren't ready for the fight.
Well, and I like the reason I like that angle. I like inverting some of these thought experiments because it makes sense from a strategic perspective when you're talking about Russia and China will hit us hard, right? If we're not going to take the lead, they're going to take the lead. They'll take the lead at our expense. But at the same time, if I want to play devil's advocate, a lot of people in this audience, a lot of people get into the community, and a lot of people got into the MAGA base by at least recognizing on a baseline that the United States as an institution and as a story is not necessarily what we wish it was, right? We're not in the Eisenhower era. We're not in the Kennedy era. We're in the Trump era, and I think that's maybe hearkening back to that. But I guess when we bring Russia and China into the conversation, we often as Americans are framing this as what could they do to us? sometimes I like playing the thought experiment of, okay, for the sake of argument, what if you really did have a well-meaning Russian leader, a well-meaning Chinese leader, meaning that they're advocating for their nation and for their people. If you're in the MAGA community and you're spending most of your time talking about the American deep state and Washington, D.C. and the swamp and the military industrial complex, but then those same people will get on their podcast and say, we got to beat Russia, we got to beat China. That's another tightrope, I think, of saying, well, there's also some leeway we can maybe grant to some of these other nations of saying, we haven't necessarily earned a whole lot of trust at those tables, right? And I think we think of it at the other end. But do you think that's part of what Trump has been so brilliant as, is it's not just he's strong enough, but he's also had to earn their trust. It's not just that they've had to earn his trust at those tables because of all the damage previous American leaders have done at those same tables.
You're exactly right. I mean, when you look at America through the lens of the Russians and the Chinese, they can see much more clearly than the American people, because the American people, again, have been lied to for decades. Our educational system has been feeding propaganda to our children that are now CEOs and politicians that bring that propaganda into their policies. The Russians and the Chinese, for example, can see much more clearly the devastation that America has caused around the world because of our corruption, our money laundering, and the administrative state that has turned into the deep state, and the globalists that are controlling American politics, as well as Americans destabilizing countries around the world. So Ukraine is the perfect example in 2014, overthrowing, and then it becomes a cesspool of drug trafficking, human trafficking, laboratories for bioweapons, money laundering, basically an underbelly of corruption that seeped into Mother Russia that finally became so intolerable they had to do something about it. And their window of opportunity was somebody that was weak, like President Biden.
Right. You mentioned earlier tonight, I thought it was a great, interesting way you framed it. You said space is a platform for peace. Right? Is that how you put it?
Yep.
So something I am not well versed on, but I'm interested in your perspective on is, I'm fascinated by the JFK administration, and I see a lot of policy and narrative just synergy between a lot of the Trump storyline and a lot of the JFK storyline, specifically, ironically, including Russia, where you've got JFK and Nikita Khrushchev navigating many of the same kind of battle space that it seems Trump and Putin have been navigating. I don't know if that means that Khrushchev was good or not. There's a lot of mirrors there. But specifically when you're talking about space, what's your perspective on Kennedy? As far as I'm aware, I mean, he was really the main driver of the space race and kind of kickstarting that narrative in America, or boosting that narrative. I wonder, specifically in the Kennedy era, what you can tell us about that and his focus on space and his focus on the space race. Do you think he saw it the way you're framing it when you're talking about kind of a platform for peace, even though he was competing with the Soviets?
No, I think the analogies are very, very powerful between President Trump and his creation of a space force that will change history, and President Kennedy and his declaration of putting a man on the moon in this decade, and more, and the dual nature of recognition of how positive that's going to be for the human race, but also that it's framed in a narrative of competition to really stoke the creative juices and the energy of the American culture. And President Trump is doing the same thing. The difference is that President Trump has tools available to him in the age we live in now, where he can communicate a little more effectively with multiple countries. I think a little bit easier than in the early 60s, when it was a little more difficult. But it was, and they both had their troubles. I mean, man, when you take a look at what President Kennedy had to put up with the military officers of the time and the people that were trying to lead him astray, whether it was the Bay of Pigs or then the Cuban Missile Crisis, poor President Kennedy was really surrounded by enemies, and so was President Trump. And still is. So, the analogies just go on and on and on. But with regard to the space race specifically, it wasn't that he kindled it. I mean, you take a look at what Eisenhower did after World War II and the building of our nuclear triad and the understanding of what space could mean for the human race and the national security imperative of dominating that. That conversation was deeply underway, and President Kennedy had some good advisors to help him on how he could start a productive fire under the butts of America.
Okay.
And Sputnik was that spark back in 1957.
So a lot of this came from. So he was really following the Eisenhower model, and then it seems like there's a letter to Congress I found recently that Eisenhower wrote to Congress where he was warning of at that time, he wasn't calling it the military-industrial complex. I think he coined that term in 1961.
Right.
But I saw a 1958 letter that he wrote to Congress where he was warning about the compartmentalization of the U.S. military and talking about it. And I mean, even there, it's incredible, the analogs to what Trump is very publicly navigating. But so it seems like Kennedy was really picking up the baton from Eisenhower and trying to forward a lot of that, in your view?
Well, yes, but it's not just Eisenhower. I mean, in every age, there are really a group of very smart people that get the right message to the leaders, the political leaders that have the power to do something to actually, move the needle. And so President Eisenhower did, push that rock up the hill a little bit. President Kennedy pushed that rock up the hill a little bit. And the same is true with President Trump. When he came into office, the idea of a space force has been pushed for decades because people that understand the survival of our country and how technology can change fate realized that we needed an institution to focus on space, or we would have our asses kicked by other countries that do the same thing. And China had a space force long before we did that most people don't recognize. So both Kennedy and Trump picked up the baton, and I got to watch it firsthand with President Trump, where one of my jobs back in 2013 was I was the general officer that was the Air Force representation to the Quadrennial Defense Review, which is basically a 20-year strategy that the DoD has to give to the president, that the president has to give to Congress. They've scuttled that now because it eventually became a pretty useless operation because the bureaucracies figure out how to kill anything that's useful. But back in 2013, we brought in this idea of a space force. And President Obama said, there's no way I'm going to put my political capital against something like that that would come at the cost of my domestic agenda. So President Trump, it was such a gratifying thing when, it was on, it was just to watch the message finally being delivered to President Trump, and President Trump recognizing the historical threads and the strategic understanding of what America needed to do, and then having the guts, and this is really the big one. He had the guts, and the courage to do it, even though he knew he would put up with the sarcasm, the ridicule, and the humiliation that came along with the other side of the fence, teasing him about it and impeaching him as they were voting for it.
That also makes me think, one of the things I kind of wanted to get into as well, speaking of Kennedy and space and Trump, the space race, what you just said there, it is almost surreal that it's this mainstream, even lefty talking point of trust the science, right? They're the party of the science. We learned all of that during COVID. I grew up with that mentality as a Northeast liberal. We're the sciencey ones, right? We go down Cape Cod and that's where all the scientists are, and Harvard is where all the smart people are. And yet it is bizarre that you'll watch a 1950s, 60s, 70s movie and it's like space race, American optimism, maybe not in the 70s, but 50s and 60s. And you talk to somebody about the Space Force today, or when, like you said, when Trump founds it, and they look at you like you're crazy. And you have to talk to them and say, aren't you guys the party of science? Aren't you guys the party of progress and technology? So I guess what I'm trying to drive at here were we engineered away from the idea of a space race, nuclear acceleration, and I guess just sort of American ingenuity and technological acceleration in general? Were we specifically engineered off of that path by the powers that be, or people that benefited from us not being on that path? Because it's quite a pivot, right? To go from American optimism and we're going to go to the moon and we're going to get all these second order effects of the space race technologically that I'm told, is responsible for a lot of our technological innovation. I guess, do you think that was specifically engineered or just happened over time?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think I have never seen any evidence where, we could hear President Johnson, talking about intentionally doing this. But I think that the incentives of people with power and money who could see the explosion of opportunity that took place with the space race in the 60s, for example, the opportunity to provide almost free energy and information and resources to people everywhere on the planet. You lose control. Where do you get your money? Where do you get your revenue? Where do you, keeping things the status quo? One, it plays into human nature of not wanting change, but the people in charge, the people with power, the people with money, I think they were afraid of the kind of explosive progress that was happening in the 60s. And there was this definite pivot to, we aren't going to do all these amazing things we talked about in popular mechanics and all the science magazines of what we could do with space, because everything we're talking about doing in space right now, they were talking about in the 50s and 60s.
Yeah.
And none of it happened. None of it. So I think that there is, there's probably two forces. One is the force of people in power wanting to keep the status quo because they know that's their trough of money. And two, they don't want to inject all this innovation and then the unexpected, where all of a sudden you have free energy. What the hell are you going to do now?
Right.
Where are you going to get your money? That kind of thing.
Yeah, I guess that's why it's hard to go down those rabbit holes and not think that there was influence there.
Yeah.
Of saying who. I guess an inversion of cui bono. It's not so much who benefits; it's who's not going to benefit from going in this direction. But speaking of tightropes, it seems like maybe that's another thing Trump is navigating. Space is one of those things that we're talking about, but parallel to that, we definitely have the AI acceleration narrative is very big. I'll admit that I was not a big believer in that being a big disruptor a couple of years ago, but the more I've started to try to interface with AI and learn about it, I think maybe I was wrong about that, and we are entering sort of an exponential game there. But again, it seems like Trump is trying to walk this tightrope of how do we embrace a lot of this technological progress and acceleration without incurring all of the negatives of that kind of disruption.
Yeah.
On our current situation.
No, it's a tough tightrope because generally, when you have these kind of massive changes in the cultural tools of a population, it's associated or the tearing down of old institutions and the building up of new institutions. It's generally associated with tremendous violence, and that's really, I think the wonderful, responsible nature of President Trump is that he is managing these journeys so that we do not we maintain the rule of law, and we move at a speed that is that the culture is capable of moving at. That's really important. And it takes great patience and wisdom, because the excitement of doing something new and breaking out is really cool. The promise of uplifting the human condition is really awesome. But if you do it too fast, you can regret the journey.
You mentioned that word, actually, that I'd forgotten about. You mentioned the word breakout. We spoke a few days ago. I wonder if you can flesh that out a little bit when you're talking about is that breakout in terms of putting us on a certain rail, or prepping a battle space where these companies organically can engage in this kind of breakout that we're heading toward?
Right. So, I guess the best way to frame the breakout conversation is the longer the government is in existence, the more regulatory, spaghetti grows up around the culture. Meaning that if you're an entrepreneur with a clever idea, it is almost impossible to get that idea into existence because of all of the regulation and all of the oversight and all of the laws that build up in a society over time. There are so many breakout inventions that are just pent up, ready to explode, that will disrupt many industries in America. And so, yes, I think that he is preparing the ground for these to happen organically because of deregulation and because of this partnership between the government and the industry that I talked about, where government is run more like a business. And now you can start, like Intel, but then you pick this company that you've never heard of before, and the government invests in it, and all of a sudden you have energy that is 1/100th of the price that you had before, and it's available everywhere. And every house has its own source of energy, and you're like, what the hell? Or water, where now you have the energy for your house, and you can draw water out of the humidity in the air, and you don't need a water filtration plant, or you don't need desalinization that kills the ocean. Now all you need, you can see that on all of the major pillars of performance, the 7 things that make a prosperous society, your food, your water, your shelter, your transportation, your energy, your information, your healthcare, that all of them have the potential of breaking out, and healthcare. Look at what, we're doing right now with Make America Healthy Again.
Right. Well, and I'm even selfishly dealing with some of that, and we're trying to figure out what we're doing in terms of, is Mrs. Bright staying home? Is she not in a couple of months with the baby and all the stuff I've got going on? And it's a shame that we're in a society right now where the first question that comes to our minds is not what's best for our family. It's who's got the health insurance. And it complicates, right? I know that's not the same thing as the technology, but it's kind of all baked into the cake there. That's a big problem for a lot of people.
Yeah. So as we break out of this slavery, which is the administrative state, or the deep state globally, the trick is to let all these breakouts happen naturally, where the population now has a novel and useful tool to make life better, make them more successful, prosperous, healthy, and secure, both at the family unit and home level, all the way through the nations, and not just America, but all nations. This is the golden age. That's what we're talking about here, and the conditions are being set.
Do you have a few more minutes to hit a couple more things? few more minutes. Those are famous last words on this show.
We've only been going 2 hours, so I don't know how.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's how I feel about it. This is we would just be leaving Rivendell and the Fellowship of the Ring at this stage. We're not even on the journey. So one of the things that comes to mind, obviously, with Space Force, with Space Race, all this stuff, is NASA and some of these legacy institutions, speaking of the administrative state, that have a very negative, I guess that's just my opinion. Right now, I would guess that among many America First patriots, something like NASA and some of these other military adjacent accelerators in the past, or institutions from the past, have a pretty negative connotation right now. Feels like the Trump administration is determined to change that. So speaking of tightropes, whether it's NASA, whether it's, the DOD even, and some of the DOE, the Department of Energy, is pretty interesting with, I think it's Chris Wright. What do you see going on in that world from the administrative state perspective? And again, a tightrope that the Trump administration seems to be walking between understanding and acknowledging the damage that's been done to some of these institutions and where you see them going in the future.
Yeah, it's a tightrope as well, and so this this theme of a conversation today, this one fits perfectly. But you need to view this from an external lens as well as this internal lens. So there's no question that these institutions over time have become bloated, and there's less and less return on investment for the money put in. And becomes more and more bureaucratic, more and more people. It can sometimes look like a jobs program, but do not underestimate. And this is where President Trump, has extraordinary wisdom. He's a marketer, and he understands the power of an iconic idea and an iconic brand. NASA and DARPA and even DOE. They are brand names globally that everybody respects. Most people in other countries have no clue about the fact that NASA might need some, trimming around the edges or more. All they know is NASA means America. It means the pioneering spirit. It means scientific discovery. It means exploration and going where no man has gone before. Right. It is a brand for the ages. Why torpedo the brand? Okay. So what President Trump is doing is he is maintaining the glimmer and the sheen of that brand. But he is also correcting the mechanisms internally to make it actually run like a business and produce better return on investment for the money they're getting. And so that's the tightrope he's walking. Hey, internal people that understand the details are pretty pissed off, and many of them will say, just kill it all together and start from scratch. President Trump realizes the international power of these institutions, and he's not going to just throw the baby out with the bathwater. And that takes patience on both sides. That takes President Trump walking a tightrope of those that want to kill the baby and those that want to never change the baby or ever have the baby grow up.
That's a good way to put it, and might sound silly to some people, and I'm not saying I always agree with it, but I think proof of concept of what you're saying from Trump's perspective is he deploys those narratives about public American brands, not just about really important institutions like you're talking about. NASA is an American institution. I mean, Trump will put out public narratives about Budweiser. I mean, a year ago, a lot of us were like, get rid of it, right? F them. Yeah. And Trump puts out his posts and says, like, you better get in line. But even for a beer company, he, to your point, is saying, you're a strong American brand. Football Sundays and Bud Light, for a lot of Americans, it feels American. Other countries they know what the blue can means at the cookout, right? So I think that it's kind of, if he feels that way about beer companies, I think that lends credence to the idea that, to your point, he doubly feels that way about some of these other institutions.
Yeah.
I mean,
think about it.
It's a tough one.
Think about this too. And again, I having grown up in a different culture and being able to look at America from the view of the rest of the world, America is this giant to the rest of the world. I mean, we're only 340 million people. And then, 8+ billion people, on the planet. And everybody looks to America and says, they are our great hope. They are, and Budweiser, is people, I'll be in Afghanistan and they'll just, can you get me a Budweiser? And so President Trump understands the power that the rest of the world sees America as their heroes, even as they tear us down and complain about us. And you know how it is. You always try to take down the top dog, and it's kind of a sport. And they legitimately hate us for the things we've done that are bad, but they also love us because there is no culture so vibrant and innovative and hopeful for the future. So we are the great hope of the world. And that's not arrogant to say. And having lived around the world and grown up outside of America, that is the reality when you really get down to it with people around the world. And they are cheering this president on, even as the deep state and the leftists and the people in power are maligning him. The average person, the majority of people in countries around the world, have great intuition, and they see this president as being the great hero of the human race.
Well, unfortunately for you, you just gave me an opening to a rabbit hole that I need to take now, because that's just how it works. So another macro that feels like it's developing is what you just said there makes me think of the city on the hill rhetoric, right? The America is a city on the hill. Trump branding this era, the golden age, in advance. Mm-hmm. It's like a narrative declaration of war, declaration of intent, a declaration of war. But you have a lot of experience internationally, not just your childhood, but professionally. And as much as we can focus on the U.S. and everything, I think that it's reasonable that a lot of people in this community are looking at Europe in particular, maybe, and seeing, man, maybe it's not going to be as clean over there to have this kind of sovereign take back of these institutions and of these governments. We're seeing a lot of unrest, much more so than in the U.S., I would say, about immigration, government overreach, etc. But I guess the reason I thought of it is that you're talking about the U.S. and the symbol that it is. Do you think that the era of Trump and the resurgent era of Trump right now is having an effect on these other nations? Maybe it's destabilizing right now, but that will ultimately be positive, because it's hard for me to believe, for example, that you'd have this kind of groundswell in the Irish, in the Scottish, in the British, in the French, without them looking over here and saying, hold on, they seem to be doing this stuff that we all secretly in our homes think we should be doing. Mm-hmm. Why not us?
Yeah. No, I think that is going on. And it's not, I don't even think, I know. I mean, as I talk to friends and colleagues in other countries, it is happening that they are looking and saying, if Trump can do this, we all can be saved. If he cannot succeed, we're all screwed. That's kind of the mentality, but it has emboldened leaders to start standing up. I think they have a pretty clear-eyed reality of how difficult it is to break out of the shackles they're in. That the noose is really tight around the neck in certain countries. The UK, you just saw the protests taking place there this weekend. So, but there's no question that this has been a catalyst, and the age we live in, where social media, explodes across the world almost immediately, has been a beautiful thing. That's one of the things I was talking about with that President Trump has that President Kennedy did not have, and that is the speed of communicating across the globe, not only with words but also with actions. And again, just like in America, the average person on the street is a hell of a lot smarter than the politicians give them credit for, or the deep state that has the power and the administrative state that is arrogantly thinking that they know better. They're pretty smart and they're savvy, and they had their spidey senses and intuition on people is really good and on what's going on. And so they are emboldened by President Trump, and they are cheering him on, and they're praying to God that they can get out of their own noose in their country without dying for it.
It's a great point you bring up about Kennedy and the speed of information. It makes me think of one of my favorite speeches of his was the infamous one where he said the very word secrecy is repugnant to a free and fair society, I believe. But to the point you just made, he was speaking to journalists in that speech, and that it feels actually kind of dark when you look at it with the benefit of hindsight.
Yeah.
When I watch that speech now, especially with all the education really Trump has given us about just how bad our media apparatus had gotten,
yeah,
it almost looks to me in hindsight as a cry for help of Kennedy, of saying, like, you in this room are standing between me and the American people.
Yeah.
So that's something we don't think about enough, I don't think, of as much bullshit as there is in the modern internet age and social media. It did give Trump a way of going right to the people that, Kennedy just did not have. He had to rely on these intermediaries, right?
Yeah, no, we're very lucky. And this, that's why I love to say we are so lucky to be living right now. The old saying, pray that you live in interesting times. And but this truly is one of those great siftings of the human race at this moment, as we go from an epic of industrialization to an epic of networks, and what that's going to mean. And it's not just AI. Just wait until you see the acceleration with AI quantum. It'll make AI today look like it's really, really stupid. So all of these tools can be good. All of them can uplift the human condition if we do our jobs right. So I'm very hopeful this golden age is going to be awesome. Just hard to know how quickly it will unfold.
Right. Well, on that note, I guess as we kind of start wrapping up, that's something we joke about kind of at Badlands. I mean, we go back and forth with Ash and G. There's the G money debates, etc. But I've talked about, again, looking at enemy narratives and thinking, why are we so afraid of the future? Is it because we've been programmed to fear the future by the very apparatus that would benefit from us being afraid of it? You think Skynet, you think Terminator, you think iRobot.
Right.
How do you think that people should adopt a mindset, or what mindset do you think is healthy in terms of going into this age of probably acceleration? We could all agree that it's an accelerated age. Mm-hmm. What do you think is a good mindset to have in terms of being sober-minded about it, and realistic, while also being optimistic about some of these things?
Right. Well, there's a balance there, but I always go back to the touchstone. What do I believe? And I believe in the Bible, and I believe that the Bible was given to us as a touchstone of how we should live our lives in this sinful world we live in. And the one thing that is stated every time you go to church and is in the Bible, at every turn, and that is, be not afraid, do not be anxious. Okay, and it's a message of hope. It's a message of enthusiastically going into the future without the fear that if you leave, that all you have to do is worry about living a moral life. All you have to do is worry about loving God and loving your neighbor as God loves you. Okay. And if you just focus on that, it's such an optimistic world when you treat your neighbor with kindness. Now, it doesn't mean you are foolish. It doesn't mean you aren't aware that there's evil out there. It doesn't mean that you aren't strategic, but it means that you are hopeful and you're filled with a spirit of goodness and treating your neighbor as you would like to be treated. And that neighbor can be a Russian, a Chinese, and you can peel away the ideology and the governments that are enslaving people and those that are helping people. You can even be, forgiving of America and some of the things they've been doing, so that you can get back on the right path. But ultimately, focusing on the optimism. If you have a choice, you can be optimistic and have no fear and have no anxiety, or you can worry yourself sick and you can be pessimistic and you can walk around with your head hung down, worried that you're going to die. That's just no way to go through life. One way is joyful and happy and everybody around you is happy, and the other is miserable and everybody around you is miserable. Which one do you want? So for me, it's kind of a no-brainer. Look to God, treat other people like you want to be treated. Your whole purpose in life is to glorify God. And if you can't, and recognizing we are moral creatures. And if you don't believe that, that's okay. I can't force you. That's the beautiful thing that God gave us, free will. You have the free will to not believe in God. You have the free will to believe we're not moral creatures and that we were just created out of stardust magically. And, it was just luck of the draw that you have this mind that is a supercomputer beyond anything we can understand. So I always go back to that touchstone. That's how I think God intended us to have perspective as we go into this future.
Yeah, I think it's, I said this recently, but after becoming a father, I find it both encouraging and also sad to look at other people and think, how could you possibly have a baby and not come away thinking what you just said? And I'm speaking as again, I've never called myself an atheist in the past, but certainly agnostic, just a cute word for atheist in liberal intellectual sphere. Yeah. But I don't understand how you can look at a baby and think there isn't a God, first of all. And second of all, that a baby is some sort of total blank slate that doesn't have some inherent goodness. I know it sounds like seeing my son laugh at things. Like, I didn't teach him to laugh. It's like, he just knows, knows dad's hilarious. He just knows my material is so much better than mom's. But just that, right? That there's something there. That's not stardust. That's laughing. That's something there.
That's right. Yeah. The fact that he's brilliant enough to recognize brilliance, that's pretty cool. but it's true. And then it's not about judging other people. It's not saying that you have to believe like I believe, because God's going to sort all that out. But boy, the power of a spirit of joy and gratitude, where we are moral creatures created by God to love one another and love God. What a beautiful world that can be. Now, you have to be prepared that there will be this evil person that doesn't believe that will come and try to kill you. And that's why we have a state, to protect us. That's why we have police. It's because of the fact that we're not perfect. But boy, when you can carve out that security, prosperity, and health, and you have this attitude of joy and lack of anxiety towards the future and hope in the future, life can be so beautiful. And we've been put in this garden called Earth that is just magical. And if you haven't gone out to be in Mother Nature with no connections to technology in a while, do it, because that's how you avoid going insane with all the noise of a digital age. And the more we can do that and give our children that, the better off we're going to be.
Well said. I hate to ruin that, but I want to hit you with one more.
Okay.
And you might have to weave on this one. So, general macro question. When we're talking about the golden age, we're talking about acceleration, all this kind of things. Patriot plans, 5th gen warfare, stuff we theorize about and stuff the administration talks about. Even Tesla. I have my theories about the Tesla company and whether or not Trump and Elon are working together still or not. Where do you think the line is between disclosure and discovery? In other words, we're told we're accelerating into this technological future, energy future, etc. Do you think a lot of this stuff is prepping the conditions for organic discovery and acceleration, or is there some element going on here that is disclosure of energy, of technology, kind of under the guise of acceleration in the Trump administration?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a little bit of both. I think that either extreme is not going to capture the truth. One of the jobs I had was to bring technology on the engineering benches of America into the warfighter as quickly as possible, so that we stayed ahead of our enemies, and so those relationships have allowed me to have a peek under the tent, if you will, of what's going on, and it's amazing. But many of those things have not been operationalized, meaning that they work and they are theoretically scalable, meaning you could put them in the hands of everybody and everybody would benefit from it. But it's never been operationalized because of all the reasons we talked about. Others have been operationalized and they are kept secret because they are very useful to America. And I think both things will happen. There will be, the art of revealing and concealing is really important in the art of war and the art of national security, the art of diplomacy and statesmanship. And so there will be some revealing and concealing as part of this journey. And there will be those organic developments of technologies that have been suppressed or been sitting on a bench or in a file somewhere that will now be operationalized because the shackles have been taken off. So both will happen. And the history books will eventually tell, because some of those things that need to be concealed right now are being concealed to maintain a competitive advantage for America.
So if you've been sitting on a patent and you've been worried about the deep state taking you out, this might be the administration to try to get that patent out there, right? Because maybe the current people won't be whacking you.
Patents, the industrial espionage in the digital age is such that a patent is very expensive, and the second you publish it, it'll be stolen. Okay, just count on it. So, smart people do not put their trade secrets into a patent. The patent may allow them to sue you if you make something identical. But for example, you make a patent for a cookie, and somebody will take that patent and they'll add 1 more gram of sugar, and they'll just make the cookie and market it, and you're out of luck. You can't sue them because it's different. So patents were, I think, useful in the past. Their utility is very, very marginally low these days.
It's interesting, General, because we just kind of started doing stuff in the info war, but other people just try to file trademarks for things other people have made. You see this in the book publishing world too, and it turns out, if you're, to your point, if you're just trying to earnestly do something, you don't usually start with the trademark or the patent. You just do it.
That's right.
Right? And you let the market decide who is the thing.
Only security is speed. There you go. Speed is life. Okay.
Yep.
So I don't need any patents. As long as I move fast enough to innovate ahead of any of my competition, I'll be the one making the profit, and I'll be the one dominating the market and setting the conditions for success. And if somebody else moves faster than me, great. But that way I don't have to waste money and time on a patent, unless you want to go sue somebody. But again, suing just drags you down and makes the lawyers rich.
Well said. Well, I really appreciate the time. Yeah. Hopefully not the last time. We're going to have you on periodically. I know the audience is just really happy when you not only when you come on the shows, but you're very generous with your time, especially at the events. So anybody that hasn't come to a GART, General Kwast is at almost every one, if not every one. Am I going to see you in Florida in a couple of months?
We'll be there, Cocoa Beach, watching some launches with you on the beach.
Awesome. Thank you so much for the time.
You.
Very encouraging. It's all you can't come out of a conversation with the general feeling negative. So I think it's gonna be an interesting year. Do you have any last comments or sort of things you're interested in of what the administration's doing, or the next few months, kind of trends we might see on some of the stuff we talked about?
Yeah, well, I think, like we talked about a little bit, these first months are frustrating because as you set the conditions, things can get worse a little bit. Let's take the tariffs, for example. But that flywheel is going to start moving now in a positive direction, and the money's going to start flowing. So the economy is going to get better and better and better. And, it may not be overnight, but you start marking the months, and things are going to be pretty exciting. So I remember President Trump talking about it's going to be a great Christmas. And we all were questioning which Christmas is he talking about. And I think that every Christmas from here on out, as long as he's in office, is going to be better than the last. So let's enjoy the ride. And don't forget, I guess my final comment is don't forget to stop and smell the roses as we're in this fight for our lives, because we are in a fight for our lives as free people. Don't forget to stop and, love on your husband or your wife or your kids, and realize, what's really important: God, family, and then everything else. No matter what you do, God, family, and then everything else. So spend the time, be disciplined, spend time with your God, spend time with your family, and then your life will be joyful.
Thank you so much for the time, General. And the audience loved it. Got a lot of comments here for you as well. But I will talk to you sometime soon, I'm sure. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
And thank you. All right, I'll talk soon.
Bye-bye.
All right, guys. General Kwast there. Always a fantastic conversation. Very encouraging. He's got a great way of, if you are on the wrong signal, he'll be very polite about how he sort of tells you you're on the wrong signal. But hey, I think we're kind of on the right signal around these parts, for the most part. I'll hang out with you guys for a few minutes. I don't have some big rant. These are famous last words. I don't plan to do some 48-minute rant, pretending that I'm not going to do a big rant. I will get to your comments. I'll get to your rants. And we'll try to get out of here. It's a tightrope. Speaking of tightropes, it's a tightrope on the narrative because I'm notorious for going 3 hours or more. But I don't know if people like that, if they want it shorter. I don't know. Is what it is. That was a great conversation, though. I always want to be respectful of the time, while understanding that I have 68 more pathways we could take these conversations in. But that's why we always set ourselves up for the new ones, for the next conversation. So General Kwast will be at Gart Cocoa Beach, which is in 2 months, just over 2 months, early November. You guys can see him there. So that'll be fun. Shout out to Joni Kwast as well. Awesome woman. And looking forward to seeing her there as well. Before I get into rants and boosts and some of your guys' comments, I am going to hit our final sponsor for tonight, which is us at Badlands. So if you want some cool stuff, we use this in the Bright household. It's good stuff. It's gotten rave reviews from Mrs. Bright, who is pretty damn picky about this kind of stuff. But it's also a way to support Badlands and everybody that you see on the network. That is, get ready to ignite a revolution with soft disclosure. This isn't just a product drop, it's a full-on movement that's about to shake things up. Personal care that doesn't mess around, no compromises, pure, unapologetic quality. The lotion is supercharged with aloe, goat's milk, and our exclusive Badlands oil blend. It's not your average drugstore goop. It's a barrier-restoring powerhouse. Choose unscented when you want clean and simple, or vanilla citrus when you want to smell like you actually give a damn. Then the deodorant. Natural, aluminum-free, and straight-up badass. Built to last 2 months of daily use with scents like crisp mint or bold lemon grapefruit. No gimmicks, just protection that actually delivers. And finally, the tallow bar. And no, it's not deodorant. It's a vanilla coffee tallow stick. Primal fuel for skin that's been through hell. Rub it where you need moisture. Elbows, hands, knees, basically anywhere you're tired of feeling like sandpaper or want baby soft skin. Every bottle, stick, and bar is handcrafted in Colorado by Badlanders who live and breathe truth. Partnering with Willow Wind Farm and Badlands Media, We're putting our money where our morals are. Soft disclosure. Make truth your routine. Head to softdisclosure.com. Use promo code Badlands for $5 off. Join the fight today. That's softdisclosure.com. Promo code Badlands. And again, I do currently on my feet have socks from this very place. I don't know why they're not making that their main business. Perhaps because it took many years to craft these socks that are adorning my feet. I don't even wash them very much, to be honest with you. That's how good they are. But anyways, as you guys found out at Guard, I don't wash all of my clothes all that often. Just is what it is. All right, things are getting weird. It's getting to be that time. Let me grab a couple of boosts from last week. By the way, guys, shout out again to Brad Zerbo, who I had on the show last week, of course, and Codex 911, which is blowing up as it should. No pun intended. Blowing up as it should. And speaking of boosts and all that kind of stuff, you guys have been super generous to Brad, and it's awesome to see. When you're generous to Brad, you're generous to the movement. And very cool. Cammy June sent $10 over to the narrative and just said, well done, BB. This was for last week's episode. Gomi 217 or 1217. Gome 1217. $15. Great to watch y'all discuss the Codex 911 documentary. Indeed, it was. If you guys missed that, Brad and I did an episode, Codex of Truth, last weekend, and that was really all about 9/11 and his documentary. And I will grab rants. And yeah, by the way, guys, 28 minutes remain. Let me check. In the Kickstarter for the debut of Burning Bright Publishing. Damn. A bunch of last-minute Larrys coming through with purchases or pledges for Swordpunk. Badlandsmedia.tv/Swordpunk. If you want a copy, it will go away, perhaps indefinitely. I don't know. If I write a sequel, I'll probably do another campaign. Otherwise, if you don't grab this physical copy, you'll have to wait a few months and we'll do an audio version of this, which will be pretty damn cool. We got actors, we get sound effects. We basically made an audio movie. And if you're into just badass stuff, you might be into it. But thank you for the support, everybody. For anybody who doesn't know how that Kickstarter stuff works, it's still going to take a few months for me to get the books to you. It's going to take like 2 weeks for Kickstarter to even send me the money from the campaign because people pledge to pay the money. Then Kickstarter goes and knocks all the doors down to try to get the money for the pledges. They send me whatever they actually get at the end of it. And then I can put the order in. And then I have to wait for the order. And then I have to pack the order. And then I have to ship the order. So, meaning I'm going to make Mrs. Bright do all that stuff. I'm just saying, for the sake of martyrdom, and for the sake of the narrative, you can pretend I'm going to have to shoulder that burden when in actuality I will be gladly displacing as much of that burden as possible onto Mrs. Bright. But that's the way that whole process works. So, just trying to be transparent there. Rants. What else was I going to say? Who knows? Who knows what I was going to say? Curious Cat, what do you think of Duffy putting nuclear reactors on the moon? I didn't see this earlier. Man, that is an interesting rabbit hole. We'll have to have him back on. I don't think that's going to become less relevant over time. Melindy, way off topic. Need to voice this in the ether, though. Did Brazil get kicked out of BRICS? Kind of hilarious. If so, I didn't see anything about that. I saw your comment here. I don't see anything about that. So I don't know where that narrative came from. Jessica Garner back to the Kickstarter just in time. Thank you, gentlemen, for a wonderful discussion. Thank you, Jessica. I appreciate it. It was funny. I actually went to a Badlanders meetup in Plymouth, Massachusetts. Surprised some Badlanders yesterday. That was pretty fun. There was about 15, 20 people there. And a bunch of them were, I was like, did you guys buy my book? And they're like, well, no, I'm not really into that kind of thing. And then when I got home, I had a bunch of new orders. So, you can guilt and shame people into buying something they have no interest in. If you're just like, Why wouldn't you guys do that? Why wouldn't you buy a cyberpunk Korean ninja story written by an American? Or do you not even believe in the movement? That's what I'm wondering. Like, I don't know how you guys can look yourselves in the mirror if you have not bought a ninja book that I wrote. It's just, shame works. Shaming is acceptable, Bay Theater Dave says. That's absolutely right. And Grease Monkey, General Kwast, is the world flat or round? Asking for a friend. I kept that one out on purpose. I'm not into the flat earth conversations. And it's not even because I don't find any value in the conversation. It is such a toxic rabbit hole that is so annoying that I'm not besmirching anybody. I don't care. I don't care if the earth is flat or round. I care more about the stuff we talked about tonight. Just kind of gay stuff to worry about, Go fly over the ice wall. If you're so worried about it, take a little rowboat, go out to the ice wall, and see if a bunch of Nephilim grab you and turn you back around, right? It's like... Tattoo Teacher, $20. Badlanders are so fortunate to have General Kwast sharing his precious time with our community. Thank you for the enlightening conversation. Thanks, BB and Steve from the Badlandia Task Force. Thank you, Tattoo Teacher. EC was here. Always a pleasure to hear from you, General. Absolutely. Rita Dodson, great show. Thank you, gentlemen. Ashley D, I'm just getting here, but wanted to say hi. Going to the top as no offense, BB, but I don't want to miss a single thing. Lieutenant Kwast is my favorite. He's Benny's favorite. He should be your favorite, I would say. And by the way, I get it. There's like 4 accounts that come in every show and they're like, why are you talking so much? I don't know, guys. It's just what I fucking do, right? I talk a lot. I'm on a show called The Narrative, you fucking idiots. By that I mean like the 4 accounts that do that every time. It is what it is. General Kwast is a big boy. He's okay talking. He's okay when I talk back to him. That's how a conversation works, okay? It's not an interview. Just to set the record straight. For anybody that's going to make a sock account from the Friends Network, you pussies, and come over here every week and try to say stuff like that. It's not an interview. It's a conversation. That's what I do. I'm not into interviews. I think interviews are gay. I'm into conversations. And what I like the most about General Kwast is he's a fantastic conversationalist. So, anyway, I'm not everybody's cup of tea, and that's okay. But you're not my cup of tea either. Okay? It's the way it works. And it's the benefit of being Irish. Just, don't give a shit so hard that you go all the way back around. But anyway, said before, we notice the patterns. We know when it's sock accounts. Sometimes it's earnest. When there's earnest criticism of me, I go like, that might be earnest criticism. F them for that earnest criticism. It's just that it's a more respectful F you. Whereas when it's a sock account, it's a disrespectful F you, if you understand what I'm saying. And we know when it's a sock account. Usually comes from the Unity crowd, right? People who are very into Unity publicly tend to be involved in lawsuits to destroy our company privately, right? Pussies. Absolute disgusting pussies. But besides that, I'm super into Unity. I hope you guys all feel unified. And, people saying no F you. I mean, I like that, see? It gives me the warm and fuzzies, because I know you mean it. I know you mean it like a warm hug. That's how it feels to an Irish Bostonian. Melindy, just because someone doesn't believe in your God doesn't mean they don't believe in nothing. I suppose that's true. One of the things I always say about atheists is that they don't not believe in anything. They believe in nothing, and they believe in it very strongly. If you go to an atheist with that, you might break their brain a little bit. Like, you pray to nothing. Nothing is your God. And they'll have a hard time. Mrs. Real Frightened Fighter says, BB is salty tonight. No, not really. I was at the beach, though. There was salt at the beach. Anyway, those soccer accounts usually come in for like 5 minutes. They go away. Then they come back for 5 minutes. They go away. But then they're nowhere to be seen at the end of the shows. So it's just not that hard to figure out. Darylyn 10 says, I left a super chat on YouTube. Thanks for a great interview. Thanks, guys. Because of the way I have my setup on this show, I don't see the YouTube feed. Like, I have to bring it up on a separate thing, and it doesn't like save the rants over there for me or the super chats. So I apologize when I don't see those, but I appreciate it. Astrami, wonderful. Thanks, General, and thank you, BB. Thank you. And sends $17 over. It says, that's what I meant to give. Okay, well, you gave $18 then, by accident. Counterinsurgent, keep talking, BB. We can't quit you. Thank you. I'm a little tired. Tonight. I don't think I have a giant big rant in me. I always do. But you're trying to... I know what you're doing. You're trying to get me going. Just like you did the straw man I invented to argue with 5 minutes ago. You're trying to get me going. And I'm not going to take the bait. Okay? Not tonight. Not this time. I'm going to get out of here at a lean, mean 3 hours. like the simp, weak, theatrical edition of the Fellowship of the Ring. 2 hours and 58 minutes, if I'm not mistaken. Weak, if you watch that version of the show. But I don't want to dilute the General's message, and that's exactly what I'm doing at the end of the show by accident. So, I want to be able to share this out there. And just like, if you want to share this, just edit this whole section out. And just be like, or just tell people to shut it off after General Kwast leaves. That's what it's all about. Team Smooth BB, you've got competition with the 3-hour show now, don't you? What do you mean? Got competition with the 3-hour show? I don't know what you're talking about. Melindy Bricks minus Brazil sends over an X post. Multipolarity is coming. I mean, this is just a picture of Modi and Putin and Xi. This doesn't mean Brazil is out of BRICS. You guys are being a little silly about that. The B is still a part of BRICS. But yeah, I think this coming week there's a Chinese victory parade commemorating some sort of victory. I don't know if that's the World War II one that Putin and Trump were talking about recently. But Putin's going to be there. I think Modi's going to be there. I think Robert Fico of Slovakia is going to be there. And then there was only one other Western leader, and I wrote about this the other day, who's going to be there. And it is... Let me confirm. Slovakia's Robert Fico and Serbia's Alexander Vučić are going to be there. Xi's Victory Day Parade in Beijing. Kim Jong-un, our boy. I saw Ghost in the chat. Maybe we're going to get some Kim Jong-un memes. Those are always the best memes. He's the most mimetic of the Sovereign Alliance. China's Victory Day military parade. Why are Putin and Kim Jong-un there? And what is the axis of upheaval? Ooh, this is an interesting little... You're not getting me on a rant, okay? This isn't a real rant. This is a stream of consciousness. There's a huge difference. I'm not ranting about anything. China's Victory Day military parade. Why are Putin and Kim Jong-un there? And what is the axis of upheaval? What an interesting bit of framing there. Did we just stumble upon... Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian is also expected to be on the dais. Tens of thousands of troops march to the Chinese capital, completing a quartet that Western political and economic analysts have described as the axis of upheaval. Okay, guys. I'm not saying, but I'm saying some writer a couple of months ago said the Western globalist hegemon was going to start branding a, quote, new axis. I'm just saying, there was a writer who said this was the move. And, yeah. I've been arguing that we're in the midst of a slow, steady, and then quite sudden inversion of the Axis and Allies paradigm. The new Axis and Allies paradigm, the new axis represented by Russia and China, are making inroads with Iran and all the proxies in the Middle East, North Korea, and even Africa. Guys, sometimes I don't absolutely nail it. Other times, however, I absolutely nail it. Which is why you should also subscribe to my Substack if you want. And the Badlands Substack. Because we kind of nail this stuff months in advance. And then people make social media accounts and ape what we said 2 years after the fact and say that they were talking about it for years. When the record shows that that is a lie. Anyway, yeah. New Axis are meeting. The bros, the sovereign bros are meeting this week. It's probably going to be shenanigans aplenty. And it should be fun. Maybe that'll be the theme of next week's show. I don't know who is going to be next week's guest. Who should next week's guest be, guys? I saw Ghost scrounging around in chat. You want to be on the narrative next week, Ghost? Let's all wait patiently until he answers. If he says no, it's going to be awkward. I'm not even convinced I want him to be on the show next week, but since this is a stream of consciousness, we might as well just let it rip. What do you guys think? People are saying Ghost is literally the worst. We do not want Ghost. Ghost equals the axis of Badlands media. I'm making all these things up, but I feel like nobody's even saying anything. Ghost isn't saying anything. Well, this is awkward now. What a jerk. What a freaking jerk that guy is. Jackie, don't invite Cam. You think reverse psychology is going to work on me? You think Irish don't understand reverse psychology? I'm going to reverse your reverse psychology. We're going to slow play that one. Ghost says he's game. Well, you know what? I don't know if I'm game, man. But we'll see. Actually, Ghost is my first opponent in Badlands Fantasy Football League this week. And I was besmirched heavily for my genius selections. People saying there are too many New England Patriots on my team. All of those guys suck. Why on earth did you pick a quarterback fifth? All valid things to say if you are not operating on the level that I'm operating on. Even the AI says that Ghost has a 71% chance of defeating me in week 1. We'll see. Game isn't played on paper. The game is played on the field and then translated to paper. Where we, is what it is. But we'll see how that game goes. We'll see if that determines whether or not we have Ghost on the narrative. To bow at my feet for my running roughshod over him But anyway, that might be a good time to have Ghost on, because we can talk about the Sovereign Bros and all their shenanigans. Okay, last thing before I get out of here. Shameless shilling. Speaking of Codex of Truth, before I named the narrative episode that last week, 71, there we go, I just said that word, that number. Interesting. Codex of Truth is my latest long form on burningbright.substack.com. I talked about narrative fulcrums in a timeline war, very normal sentence. But this is basically all about little pieces of what we mentioned tonight, which is the analogs of the Trump and Kennedy era. Got JFK Jr. on there. It's not a JFK Jr. is alive article. I know some people are into that. I'm not opposed to it. I don't care. I don't have anything to add to that conversation. But some interesting analogs. I mentioned Reagan in there. I mentioned Nixon. Just kind of goes through a lot of the mirrors between Trump and the Kennedy era. I have written about that in the past in Temporal Trump Card. This is kind of a follow-up on that I've been thinking of. And I referenced Brad Zerbo's Codex 9/11 as kind of inspiring this thought path. If you are interested in it, burningbright.substack.com, read it with your entire face. And also, go to badlands.substack.com. We got long forms here. We got Joe Lang on there. We got OC on there. We got the Badlands news brief, Monday through Friday. We got Ghost in here and Ash in here and the Badlands team with all their takes. Ghost with his harebrained schemes about Greenland. This is great table setter stuff. Like, if you want to go into the next day's InfoWar job site when you're punching in on the InfoWar, the Badlands news brief is going to get you prepped. You know, that's the way it goes. Brad says in chat he's pretty inspiring. I would say that he is pretty inspiring. I like that guy. And, you know, if I do a 3-hour show or a sub 3-hour show, sometimes he gets rug pulled because he's supposed to end the stream on Rumble, on the Rumble studio side, because I can't. And he'll be like, bro, I thought you were going to go 4.5 hours. Which is a little insulting. But yeah, tonight I'm just going to go 3 hours. I feel a little sick. I feel like I'm coming down with something. Anyway, guys, the rambling has fully set in, about an hour ahead of schedule. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. Thanks so much to General Kwast for coming on. Next week may or may not be Ghost. Depends how fantasy football goes this week. Otherwise, you know, fuck you guys. But I also love you, most of you. I like, what is it? I know less than half of you, half as well as I should like. And I like less than half of you, half as well as you deserve. I stand by that. I want that to rattle around in your head as if it's Bilbo Baggins' 111th birthday while you're drifting off to sleep. I just want a bit of existential dread to hang over you, of wondering, what did Burning Bright mean by that, and which category am I in? These are the things I want you to think about. And for everybody that supported the Kickstarter for Burning Bright Publishing, thank you. You have 5 minutes left. You better get in there. You better mortgage your house for one of those books. Otherwise, thanks, guys. I will talk to you Tuesday night. What are we doing for a movie? Does anybody remember? What the hell? What movie are we doing? Now it's going to bug me. My history of horrible sign-offs continues with whatever movie Chris picked. Probably some harebrained... Oh, I picked it. What an excellent pick this was. Lost in Translation is the movie for Tuesday night for Story Hour. And then, yeah, I'll see you then. Otherwise, share this if you liked it. Hit the thumbs up button, please. Enjoy your Labor Day, Monday. And that's it. Remember, the war is a story. The story is a war. Act accordingly.
were sleeping. I've been sleeping. I've been turning away from a truth I wanted not to face. There is a wound that won't heal at the center of the galaxy. There is a darkness reaching like rust into everything around us. We let it grow, and now it's here.
How many men have you killed, my lord?
I don't know.
50? 100? Countless.
Countless has a nice ring to it.
And how many lives have you saved?
500,000. Population of King's Landing. Tell me if your precious friendly commanded you to kill your own thought and stand by while thousands of men, women, children burned alive, would you have done it? Would you have kept your oath then?
Our time has come. We prepared. We grew stronger. While you rested in your cradle of power, you were trusted to lead the Republic. But you were deceived. You assumed no force could challenge you. And now, finally, we have returned.
The visions are clear now. I see possible futures all at once. Our enemies are all around us. And in so many futures they prevail. But I do see a way. There is a narrow way through.
It's not a prophecy. It's a story that you keep telling, but it's not their story, it's yours. They deserve to be led by one of their own. What your people did to this world is heartbreaking.
We gave them something to hope for.
That's not hope!
We have survived by hiding from them, by running from them. But they are the gatekeepers. They are guarding all the doors, they are holding all the keys, which means that sooner or later, someone is going to have to fight them.
I wish none of this had happened. So do all who live to see such time, but that is not for them to decide. All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given us. Forgive me. I did not see. I have failed you all. You forbear me. Captain Armor, I do not know what strength is in my blood. But I swear to you, I will not let the White City fall. Our people failed. Our people. Our people.
I wish you good fortune in the wars to come. And now it begins.
No. Now it ends.